Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if neglected Naruto has no emotions part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. It was with a heavy heart that Hiruzen Sarutobi carried the 2-year-old Naruto Uzumaki away from the orphanage for the last time. He had wanted the child to have a normal life, a normal childhood, but it seemed that his mistakes were the very cause that it wasn't to be, part of them. Announcing the fact that the boy was a Jinchuriki was his biggest mistake. Thinking a single law would be sufficient to allow the boy to live in blissful ignorance was his second. But the strangest thing was that it seemed his plans were doomed to fail from the start because the boy wasn't normal. Now anyone would claim that the son of Minato Kamikaze and Kushina Uzumaki couldn't possibly be anything else but abnormal. They'd be right, but even that wouldn't be enough to conceive how abnormal the boy truly was. 2-year-old Naruto couldn't live in the orphanage because the caretakers hated him, but because everyone there feared him. Hiruzen, on the other hand, couldn't help but see the boy, the future shinobi, as gifted. The boy had the unnatural talent of being able to sense every single negative emotion, aimed at him, or not. He could barely speak, but the boy understood people far better than one could with simple words. The Sandaime was grateful for this gift. Already it spared the boy from attacks. But it was worrisome, because word had started to spread of this talent. It started simple enough, the boy crying whenever certain people approached. At first, the reports just claimed that he was sensitive. Wasn't that an understatement? But things changed when the child was able to walk. He walked everywhere, innocent eyes watching. The children would never notice him, but a few of the caretakers had seen him lingering in shadows, in places a child shouldn't be able to reach. He was a quiet child from the start, but when he started speaking he held insight that was spot on. Shinobi children grew and matured rapidly, but Naruto was years ahead of the prodigies such as Itachi and Kakashi, even Orochimaru. His sentences were short and to the point, but they were coherent, factual, and they were delivered from the mouth of a babe. Even now the observing eyes of the Namikaze Uzumaki Union stared at him silently. He could feel the gaze on his own face and couldn't help but look down at the toddler in his arms. The appearance of Minato, the tenacity and intensity of Kushina. A perfect union of two premier shinobi. He thought of the tragedy of the deaths of the boy's parents, and realized his mistake too late. "You're sad because my parents died. You loved them." The voice sounded unnatural coming from one so young, and Sarutobi would have balked if he had not already read through reports of the boy's insight. "I love all of those within the walls of Konoha. Even you." The boy's eyes blinked up at him owlishly, and he nodded in agreement. This was almost getting too much surreal for him. "I'm sorry I scared them. I won't be going back there, will I?" So even now the boy had some perception as to the consequences of actions. He understood the nuanced regrets Sarutobi held within himself and connected that to the feelings he had unmasked inside the orphanage. The boy was 2 years old, and yet Hiruzen knew that he could topple countries to their knees. All he had to do was bring the boy to a banquet of a daimyo, and watch as all of their political schemes and intrigue fell around them. "People are really that mean?" The aging Hokage sighed. The boy's innocence wouldn't last for long. "Oh, I'm young. But I'm growing up. Faster than normal. That's weird." The boy had no chance of having anything close to resembling a childhood. All of Hiruzen's plans regarding the boy would have to be scrapped. He was too dangerous left alone. He had no option but to raise the boy himself to help him learn how to control this power of his. He'd rarely be able to see the boy, but it was the best route to take. Left alone, there were all sorts of players that could seek to take advantage of the boy. Danzo alone would. "No, I don't like him either." It was going to be a grueling few years for Hiruzen Sarutobi and his new charge. Kurama observed as his host was brought to the office of the one the humans called Hokage. He remembered the man from the night of his release, possession, and subsequent resealing. He was the second Hokage he had ever fought, and from what he remembered was close to his last prison. His time within Kushina was, painful. By design of the seal, he hadn't had much comfort in his tenure as her prisoner. Neither did they talk. As his second Jinchuriki, that had seemed to become the trend. Everything seemed to be going along just as his time inside Mito Uzumaki Senju had when Kushina had gotten pregnant. She wasn't the first Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune to get pregnant, and so it wasn't really the first time that Kurama experienced the full gestation of a newborn growing inside of another living organism, but it was the first time that he wasn't raging mindlessly from his seal as the child grew. Being a chakra construct meant that there was always a slight curiosity that he held to the workings of the more organic lifeforms of the planet he inhabited when they weren't trying to seal him or enslave him for his power. As the fetus slowly grew, he had discovered that he could manipulate it minutely with his chakra, and that brought upon him wicked glee. He could devastate his prison for what she had done to him. But as he was about to, he realized that this new life, even if it was human, had committed no sin to anything. It was the definition of innocent. The words of his father rang through his memories, and he could not find it within himself to destroy it. That had been an extreme blow to his enjoyment. He was unable to attack the growing organism, and some of his interest in it faded away. Then one day, the boredom had grown so high that he inspected the baby again and identified a gene that led to a rather lackluster feature. Almost mechanically, Kurama instructed his chakra to correct the wayward gene. It was only after the fact that Kurama had realized he had inadvertently helped a human. His disgust with himself led him to spending a few weeks doing nothing but thinking of all the ways that humans were pathetic, weak, and terrible. But the child was none of those. At least, not here where he couldn't be tainted by those in the great world beyond. And it was that fact that sparked Kurama to pause and think of his current situation. He knew that it was only the cursed clan of Uzumaki that could contain him, but there was only a handful left of them in the world. There were no senju with the wood release. His container, Kushina, wouldn't live forever. The child was going to be his next prison whether the baby knew it or not. Kurama accepted this and didn't hold it against the boy. Indeed, it wasn't his fault the status of the outside world. He was just as much a victim as Kurama himself was. That made him pause again. The child was going to be his prison. The child, the one that he could strengthen and enhance with no reason to, would be his prison. He had an opportunity before him. He could shape it so that the boy was strong. That the boy grew wise. That the boy would be above the depraved around him. He could enhance him so that he could sense the evils around him. Of course, none of these powers would be able to be at their fullest until he was sealed into the child, but he could lay the foundation for his tenure right now. So he set to work. He would make his next vessel worthy of being such. He'd gift unto the child a great advantage over any fellow human shinobi or not. Kurama's work was increased as he began to look forward to the day he'd be able to speak with the child. The one he'd had as much a hand in growing as the boy's own mother. At first he desired to form a more suitable and comfortable prison, but, towards the end, Kurama had realized that he had grown affectionate for the babe. And the day grew ever closer to the day of his birth. And what a catastrophe it had been. Sealed within the child within Naruto upon the very day of his birth was a boon to Kurama, but he knew it to be a tragedy to the boy. It took a day to get used to his new prison, the work of the damn yandames slowing his work even further. But he had nothing but the best of intentions towards the boy now, and he was assisting in the seal's function, so he wasn't stopped. The foundations he had laid were immediately acted upon and built upon. The boy would know all the evils of man, a monumental burden to any normal human, but this one would need it. He needed to have it to understand Kurama. To know that the Kyuubi's rage was justified, but not endless. That his hatred was born of fear, frustration, and regret. That was the only way to make the boy understand. The only way to ensure that his prison would be a friend. While being summoned to his Kage's office was not a new pastime, it was unfortunately still one that he was struggling to get used to. His sensei's office was still the same. A few of his portraits and mementos were still in their spots. But it wasn't his anymore, it was once more his predecessor's, the Sandaime. As with every loss of a precious person in his life, Kakashi had taken it very hard. Very hard. After all of the progress he had made in dealing with the loss of Rin and Obito, to lose his sensei and father figure, and being unable to stop it was terrible. He'd gone headfirst back into the Anbu, quickly achieving his rank of Anbu captain and taking mission after mission for 2 years. Hiruzen had understood, not approved, but allowed him to cope in his own way nonetheless. That was why today was out of the blue. An unknown. Something about it was making his gut twist uncomfortably, and he didn't know what. He jumped upon the windowsill and came face to face with the blue eyes of Minato. Kakashi stopped dead in his tracks and couldn't help but look at the blonde hair and innocently inquisitive look that stared back and think upon Minato. His leader, teacher, father. You miss your father? My father. Kakashi's blood ran cold, and the surprise kept the lid down on his instincts to push away. The boy Naruto, for who else could it be, was still looking at him, seemingly staring into his very soul. He was so unsettled that he couldn't even decide if the boy could or not. You've lost a lot of friends. A lot of family. I lost my family too. I'm sad too. I don't blame you, Nisan. Kakashi could still say nothing as the boy spoke the truths he tried so hard to lock away. Was this his punishment for failing the boy? Having all his failures laid bare to have judgment passed on them? He hadn't forgotten about the boy, he just felt so guilty. So fractured. So broken. He couldn't have raised the boy. He wasn't his father, no one could possibly replace his father. And it was his fault. No. It's not your fault, Nisan. I forgive you though. I think you're nice, you're a good person. It was at that point into the one-sided verbal conversation that Kakashi's instincts kicked back into gear, and he looked around. Besides the amused Sandaime, they were alone. Good. The boy was spewing secrets that even he shouldn't have known about. He'd have to be taught to be more quiet. He wasn't a child anymore, he was 2 years old. Kakashi hadn't been doing missions for that long. He picked up the boy in his arms and looked him over, making sure his sensei's son was all right. He gently turned him this way and that. Looking him over, he couldn't see anything wrong with the boy. He lifted up his headband and looked over the giggling child once more with his Obito's Sharingan. He seemed fine. Well, that's an awesome present. The boy stretched his arms and held his face still so he could look at the eye. Kakashi didn't know what was more unsettling, the boy talking this way so young, or knowing things without them being said. He looked to the Hokage and the old monkey gave a soft grin and gestured for him to sit. Naruto here, Kakashi won't be living in the orphanage anymore. The silver-haired man nodded silently as he sat down, keeping Naruto on his lap. The boy couldn't possibly stay there. Something was wrong or different with him, and they'd have to find out what. Did Sensei leave anything that hinted at what could be the cause? The Hokage shook his head. I'm afraid that we're very much in the dark about what brought about this in our dear Naruto-kun. Perhaps it may have to do with his tenant. Oh no. Both men paled and looked to the boy whose face was scrunched up in thought. Something you're scared of is inside me? Well, Kakashi Hatake had learned many things, but how to censor his subconscious train of thought was not one of them. Not even his Sharingan could help him with that. Gods forbid if he started thinking about clandestine operations that the Anbu were so happy to perform. Naruto's face scrunched up like he had tasted something sour, and Kakashi couldn't even fake an innocent look as Hiruzen stared at him coldly. This would certainly take some getting used to. The Hokage sighed as he pinched the bridge of his nose. The boy is going to be taken care of by me. I'll need your support and assistance as I do so. Congratulations on your promotion. So that was the plan. If Kakashi was the Anbu commander, he wouldn't as frequently be off running missions and could spare some time to watch over the boy when the Hokage couldn't either. The plan was good, but there were sure to be times the both of them couldn't look after the boy. And when we're both busy, Hokage-sama? His question had Naruto gazing at the Hokage curiously as well, knowing that his answer was to be the identity of someone new Naruto would be meeting. I have a few ideas. Naruto stuck out his tongue suddenly, and made a gagging sound. Not him. Gigi, he doesn't seem like a nice person. Kakashi watched as Sarutobi and Naruto seemed to have a discussion about additional supervisors and caretakers. The boy was amazing. Terrifying, even. The boy, if he could even be called a boy, was beyond gifted. It could be a Kekkai Genkai, but it wasn't from the Uzumaki. Minato was always perceptive, but even he wasn't anything this astute. How'd the boy do it? 1,000 theories bounced around Kakashi's head, and they all lead to the same conclusion. Naruto Uzumaki was special. The 2-year-old sitting on the Sandame's desk having a conversation, completely oblivious to the surrealness of the moment, was precious. He had to be protected. Kakashi had few friends, and no family. That was what his guilt had convinced him, at least. He hadn't deserved getting close to the boy. He'd only bring tragedy to him. He knew better now. The boy needed safety and he needed guidance. Kakashi may not have been as old as the Hokage, but he was an expert shinobi at this point. The boy needed to be surrounded by those that could care for him. It was funny that it was Naruto's words that made Kakashi realize this. He needed the boy too. They were family. Minato was a father to both of them, in different ways. Kakashi had a purpose again. He'd teach and nurture his sensei's legacy. A warmth blossomed in his chest, and he smiled as Naruto began to giggle as Hiruzen once more accidentally thought of a state secret. Kakashi, could you take Naruto to my home and watch over him for the rest of the day? Hi, Hokage-sama. Naruto turned to him, arms outstretched, and Kakashi picked him up. The hands that had killed thousands of men quite easily gingerly lifted up the child and held him close. He may have been gone from the boy's life up to now, but that would change. Even if he couldn't constantly be there, he'd always protect him. That's what older brothers do, wasn't it? Naruto's eyes opened, and he looked around in wonder. This was not the bedroom that his new older brother Kakashi had left him in. No, this was some kind of dark place, and it was wet. A wet, dark place. Naruto stood slowly and brushed the water off his back. It didn't feel good, it made him feel not comfortable. The dark, wet place was also cold. That was too long of a name, though, the dark, wet, cold place. The not good place? Well, that was fine. He took his first few steps in the not good place, and realized that it was long. There wasn't a door in sight, and Naruto was starting to get scared. He slowly made his way down the hallway and gotten more anxious the deeper he went. After a long time he made it to a big room, where a big gate was. Beyond the gate there was something that was very, very large. Two big eyes opened in the darkness and peered curiously down on them. Most children would have been scared or at least unsure of the nature of such a being, but Naruto could sense it. There was a lot of bad feelings that the animal had. A lot. Too much for Naruto to single down, but there was only one bad feeling directed at Naruto. Fear. Fear of being alone? Hello, Naruto. Naruto blinked in surprise and took a few steps closer. He shyly looked closer and saw more details of the great beast as it slowly crawled further into the light. Hi. How do you know my name? I was there when your parents named you. The boy's face widened in surprise and he took a few more steps forward. You knew my parents too? Were you friends? No, they didn't like me. Oh. The boy wasn't as exuberant anymore and slowly shrank back into himself, but still stepped closer. What's your name? Are you what Gigi and Kakashi and Ai-san were scared of? Yes. I am the Kyuubi no Kitsune. That's a long name. Kurama peered down upon the boy, still not passing any judgment. Things were actually looking good. This had been the longest and most civil conversation he had ever had with another human, besides his father. It is a title. A name people call me. My real name is Kurama. The child nodded instantly, oblivious to the importance of the moment. This was Kurama's first step towards trusting a human for the first time in his life. The child may be taking it as if it was merely a new meeting, but for Kurama himself he was on the cusp of making a bond with another. A friendship. Why are you in here, Kurama? This place doesn't seem really nice. I am stuck inside of a seal, Naruto-kun. Inside of you. This is the manifestation of the seal. Can I change it to something nicer? The great fox blinked. He was not used to this. A large part of him still expected to be manipulated or taken advantage of. It was nice. Refreshing. Indeed. You can think and will the seal to change. If that's what you want. Well, this is your home, right? Do you like it like this? Kurama gave a toothy grin and shook his head. No, Naruto-kun. I am not fond of this sewer we find ourselves in. Sewer? So that was the shorter name for wet gold dark place. Naruto found himself nodding in agreement. He didn't like the sewer either. But he didn't like the orphanage either, and he doubted that Kurama would. Kurama was too big for people houses. And he was a fox, so maybe a park? Their surroundings rumbled and shifted. A great expanse of green grass and trees surrounded the two. In the distance were mountains, all of which had their own Hokage monuments, but it was impressive for the imagination of a 2-year-old. The boy was still learning about the world around him, it seemed. That was fine. Kurama could deal with having to look at the faces of 4 humans. Honestly, after Naruto left, he might take some joy out of firing a Bijidama at 1 or 2 of the monuments. Suddenly, Kurama felt Naruto climbing onto one of his paws and he nearly flung the boy off in shock. As it were, he jerked slightly upwards, and Naruto laughed as if the bijou had done it to amuse him. He couldn't have foreseen this. The boy was laying down on his fur with eyes closed and seemed to be almost purring in contentment. I know you were scared, don't be. I'd love to be your friend. Kurama couldn't even reply. He didn't know what to say. He just looked at the boy for a second and then closed his eyes and laid his head down. He felt the boy climbing up his neck and flopping down to lay on top of his head. All things considered, he could get accustomed to this. In the 2 years that Naruto Uzumaki had made his home at the Sarutobi clan compound, something always seemed to be happening. Whether it was other Sarutobi members talking to him about his young charge walking the grounds in the dead of night seemingly talking to himself, to the boy walking up to other members out of the blue and conversing with them about their fears and grief. Just as things started to be settling down, the boy had taken it amongst himself to start wandering around the village. There were quite a few times where worried civilians had brought the boy to the Hokage Tower after having seen him wandering by his lonesome on the complete other side of the village. After the third such incident, and realizing that Naruto just wouldn't immediately be listening to his orders, he had decided that it was necessary for an Anbu squad to always be guarding the child. It was necessary. It was a protection of a future asset and a vital player in the village. Naruto would grow up and he would change things. Of course, Inu wasn't able to constantly be a part of the guard, but the Anbu commander joined in from time to time. The honor usually fell to Cat, Weasel, and Boar. It was amusing to hear their first report. How the boy always seemed to sense their presence, and would look for them. After a few hours of them constantly moving around and almost dancing away from his sight, the boy seemed to pause as if he realized that they couldn't be within his sight because of their job, and he never looked towards them again. Of course, the group knew that he was aware of their presence from the tells he subconsciously gave. It was infuriating to all of them, Weasel especially, at how their skills meant nothing in evading from the boy. Hiruzen realized that the boy was a perfect exercise for new Anbu recruits. It quickly became a normal routine for trainees to be tasked with guarding him and staying out of his sight. They always questioned why the exercise wouldn't immediately fail after getting caught once. They quickly learned that the boy was just too good. He seemed to recognize people after a few times of being near them, but he was always wary of new presences. Remedial Naruto guard quickly became an informal punishment. Of course, to the three regularly scheduled to guard him, it honed their skills. The three of them could not figure out how the boy did it, and Hiruzen had no intention of telling them. To be honest, he also found himself testing just how close he could get before Naruto would notice him. It seemed that speed was his greatest aid in circumventing the boy's senses, but even that wasn't perfect. The boy may have matured quickly, but he was still a child. He didn't have the knowledge, experience, or skills to be an actual threat to any shinobi over the rank of Jonin. That was, until he realized that Naruto was using these practices and times to train himself. It would take an experienced eye to note, but the boy's reflexes were growing, as was his range of sensing. He was 3 years old at that point, and he'd already begun training. It prompted him to sit down and teach Naruto the basics of chakra and their usage. Only to be told that his friend had already told him. Fearing for the worst, he had nearly interrogated the boy before he found out the real identity of his friend. The Kyuubi no Kitsune. That had been quite a discussion. In the end, he could not sway the boy, and he found himself helpless to deny that the boy truly did have far greater insights into a person or being's character than he did. This conversation also cemented that it was the Kyuubis doing that granted Naruto this empathy. He'd heard reports of Jinchuriki taking upon various styles and gifts of their patron bijou, but those always seemed to be more ninjutsu-orientated. This was on a whole new level. Leave it to the Kyuubi to inadvertently give his host what could amount to the greatest gift among the nine-tailed beasts. And so he began to train the boy at the young age of 3. The youngest to train in Konoha since its founding. He led the boy through his lectures of the shinobi world and of chakra and jutsu theory. The boy absorbed it all. His chakra stores were minuscule. His body weak. But his mind and senses, unnaturally advanced. The boy took to training with a vigor that reminded him of his old genin team, the Sannin. He was always training. After a few months, it was brought to his attention that the boy had roped Weasel into training with him. Apparently, Naruto coerced him into assisting after 3 hours of constantly making Weasel evade his senses. Weasel became his senpai with a vicious fervor, as revenge for being used so by the boy. Hiruzen chose to leave them to settle it out themselves. It would be good for Naruto to have yet another role model, and it was good for Itachi to have some sort of social interaction. That was the difference between the prodigies like Itachi and Kakashi and Naruto. Naruto was becoming more and more outspoken and optimistic. Kushina's personality was starting to appear every so often within the boy, but he still mainly operated under Minato's calm and analytical behavior. After 6 months of training, the 4-year-old had become a shinobi. An inexperienced and amateurish shinobi, but one all the same. His age was the only thing holding him back. He hadn't learned any jutsu, not any from his human teachers at least, but he had been starting to practice the katas of the Uchiha Interceptor style as per Weasel's request. It seemed Naruto's senpai had taken supreme interest in his career and wasn't above disregarding a few clan laws to aid him. In the time he could spare, Hiruzen had also started the boy along the path of the monkey claw style and bojutsu. Truth be told, the Hokage found himself taking great pleasure in instructing such a willing student, and had found himself beginning to lecture upon the basics of jutsu creation without realizing how advanced of a topic it was. The boy was coming along just fine, and Sarutobi found himself allowing him to sit in on diplomatic meetings here and there. They would dismiss the child as only a child, and that was a grave mistake. That was what led up to this meeting between Hiruzen and the ambassador from Kumogakure. A treaty had been reached, signed, and officiated. All that was left was to discuss plans between the two villages and host a celebration, send the ambassador back to Kumo with the good news, and they were on their way to having an alliance with yet another hidden village. Hiruzen wasn't naive, but if a tangible peace could be achieved by 3 out of the 5 great nations, it'd be the first true step towards realizing the Shodame's dream of global peace and unity. Yes, he was wary of the treaty, but he was also allowing them the benefit of the doubt. He may not be the Yellow Flash, but he wouldn't be remiss to remind Kumo why he was called the God of Shinobi. In the corner of the room, Naruto sat silently watching the meeting continue with narrowed eyes. The man from Kumo was an okay man, but he had something planned that would hurt someone within the village. And as the shinobi of Konohagakure, Naruto wouldn't let him enact his plan. Naruto watched silently as the Kumogakure ambassador radiated with a suppressed intent to do harm. Hiruzen, his Hokage, had spoke to him of proper diplomatic etiquette. Him allowing the young Uzumaki listen into such proceedings was presumptuous as it was. To interrupt or act out would be unseemly and embarrassing for the Hokage. He had to be on his best behavior. If he sensed something that was important, but not critical, he was to wait until after the meeting to debrief with Hiruzen. If it was critical, he was supposed to signal the Anbu in the room, which was what he was currently doing, yawning and stretching his arms out to his sides and then back, and then looking out the window with a sigh. That would trigger a broad sweep of the room and surrounding Hokage Tower. After Naruto had foiled an Iwagakure assassin attempt by exposing the assassin preemptively, word had spread around the Anbu headquarters that the Hokage's ward, the Jinchuriki, could become quite the useful tool for village security as well as protecting their Kage. Sarutobi had watched on in amusement for nearly a week as Inu and I, Weasel Senpai, and Naruto had established a complex form of code in his office. The boy treated it as professionally as he could as always, but seemed to enjoy trying to think of subtle tells that others would ignore, as if making their own secret code was a game. While it was true that many shinobi children did indeed play games similar, it was a unique experience to watch a child create such a versatile and useful code, one which veteran Anbu would learn with the same fervor as always, but watching them test themselves and try to decipher every movement the boy made, it made the old man happy. Naruto wouldn't have a normal childhood, but he was glad that he was happy. Or seemed to be, at least. After alerting the Anbu, Naruto slowly reached towards the Hokage and merely pulled his sleeve twice. There. His job done, Naruto relaxed and tuned the conversation out. Now there was only one thing he could do: try to interpret the man's intentions. He closed his eyes and acted the sleepy child. He had to focus. Kurama-san had spent time with him to hone his senses, and even now he could feel the bijou watching him from the seal. The fox said nothing though, knowing that he wanted to figure it out himself. He could do this. The man was arrogant, he could feel his smugness and conceitedness slowly rolling from him in bitter waves. The man hated Konoha that was hidden deep inside at the moment. He hated the shinobi clans. He hated them for taking his younger brother's life? Yes, the regret of failing his brother somehow leading to his end was there, and that self-hatred fed deeply into his loathing for Konoha. The man was in constant pain, not unlike Kakashi and I. But he wanted vengeance. Hatred didn't drive Kakashi, but it drove this man. His confidence in himself, and his hatred for the clans, the shinobi clans, the gifted shinobi clans. Kumogakure's clans had a lack of Kekkai Genkai and had more kidnapping attempts on foreign shinobi than any other hidden village. Hiruzenjiji had told him as much in their lessons not but a month ago. If that was the case, then this could be another kidnapping attempt. It would be a good opportunity to attempt to steal away a Konohan bloodline on the eve of brokering a peace between the two nations. Konoha had been preaching peace between shinobi nations ever since the last shinobi war, but which clan would be the victim? He doubted that he was the target. Gigi had told him how his mother was almost kidnapped by Kumogakure decades earlier, only being saved by his father, so the target could have been himself, but the man had no intent towards him. No, it was another clan. The most logical targets would be the Uchiha, Yamanaka, or the Hyuga. Naruto nodded slowly before catching himself. He had a role to play and he couldn't allow the ambassador to realize that he'd been made. He'd pretend to doze until the meeting was concluded. That was when he'd tell his Hokage of the secrets he had learned. He could feel the pride Kurama sent towards him from the seal, and he nearly smiled. He was happy to be of use to the village and his Gigi. He'd make sure this man's plans failed at all costs. Hiruzen sighed and rubbed his temples. The room had been cleared and Naruto sat across from his desk and Kakashi and Itachi stood on either side. The news was not favorable, honestly. Hiruzen was greatly saddened and also frustrated that his desire for peace was once more being taken advantage of by a fellow Kage. Thank the gods for Naruto, he wouldn't have become suspicious until it was too late otherwise. Why didn't we stop him, Gigi? Because he hasn't committed any crime as of yet, Naruto. If we arrest him for thinking of committing a crime, well, that wouldn't stand with Kumo. The boy blinked and nodded his head in agreement. He was young and some of his naivety still held sway, but he was learning. He was learning much quicker than anticipated. Back to the matter at hand, they had to be careful. They had Anbu following the Kumo representatives, but they didn't know who the target was or when they'd strike. Making sure the extra detail of Anbu wasn't discovered was also imperative. The thousand variables circling the situation made the aging shinobi really wish that his successor had been able to be here in his stead, but he wasn't, and it was up to him to keep his village safe. To uphold the will of fire. He had to stop himself as he saw Naruto's face grow saddened at the reminder of his father. Hiruzen steeled his resolve. He'd protect the families of Konoha if only so that no other child need feel the pain Naruto felt. Reinvigorated, Hiruzen rose from his seat abruptly. It was a mark of the severity of the action that the two shinobi and a child instantly silenced and subconsciously stilled for orders. Inu, alert the clan heads. Send a squad to every clan compound. Weasel, take Naruto to my compound and guard him. Kakashi wasted not a single instant and was gone to fulfill his orders and protect the village his family gave their lives to protect. He paused as he sensed the hesitance in both Naruto and Itachi to sit on the sidelines. "Gigi, I can help. I can sense when he is going to make his move." Itachi said nothing. If anyone would be able to talk Hiruzen down from his last order, it would be the 4-year-old child who could sense any malicious lie or secret, who could read a person better than even the Hokage himself could. "I will not risk your safety in such an operation. This is non-negotiable. Go, Weasel. Now." Naruto opened his mouth to continue his argument, but Itachi heard the steel beneath the order, and knew this wasn't Hiruzen Naruto's Gigi talking, it was the professor. The god of shinobi. And Itachi didn't dare anger his leader, and so promptly left with the boy mid-rebuttal. Sarutobi sighed, once again left to the quiet of his office. He didn't know the exact moment, but he had gotten so old. He could feel it now. He was still as strong as the best of any jounin, but he could feel the weakness in his bones and the pain in his joints. His mind felt as young as ever, but his body rebelled with each direction. His dreams were still as vibrant as ever, of a world where children need not train to kill. What he'd give to bring peace to these petty and squabbling nations. He was less optimistic each and every day. He'd really thought that the Yondaime Reikage had changed his mind. How foolish of him. The warmongering ways of Kumogakure seemed to be in full effect even now. He groaned as he realized how long Danzo was going to hold this latest development over his head. He wouldn't be surprised if his rude agents were just waiting in the shadows to take advantage of this situation. That thought rooted him back in the present. He was losing himself to the stress of the moment. He needed to protect his village. He may have gotten softer and weaker in his old age, but he wasn't any less protective of those he served. And his judgment would be as cold and swift as the kunai he'd used to end the lives of the enemy of Konohagakure. That was for certain. Naruto sat silently as Weasel-senpai stood silently, his vigil over the young boy absolute. Anyone else observing the young teen would infer nothing from his stance. And if they could see his face beneath his mask, they'd find the mask was more expressive. But for Naruto, this was the most troubled his caretaker and mentor had ever been. Anxiety, worry, anger, regret, fear. Fear that the Uchiha would be targeted. That his brother would be stolen from him while he was guarding Naruto. The realization that he was holding Weasel-senpai back from aiding his family stung Naruto. He had no desire to burden anyone, especially one who genuinely cared for him and was kind to him. He sensed every fear the usually stoic Uchiha held, and it nearly overwhelmed him. His fear for his brother, for his family, was smothering the Uzumaki to such a degree he was starting to get panicked. Fear of loss, hatred at himself, anger at his powerlessness. The Uchiha felt everything so much more than normal people. It must be the curse of hatred Kurama-san liked to go on and on about. About the vile Uchiha and their bleeding hearts and corrupted eyes. Weasel-senpai must have been a very strong Uchiha indeed if he felt emotions this deeply. As it was, Naruto didn't like his friend and senpai feeling this way. But his senpai knew him well. He couldn't talk him into going with him to stalk the ambassador. Weasel-senpai wouldn't let himself be manipulated into escorting Naruto against a direct order from the Hokage. But what could he do? Naruto could still sense the ambassador, and he could tell he was nearing his point of action. He needed to stop him himself. He wanted to show everyone that he could be a shinobi. That he could save them as they saved and cared for him. So he had to think. He couldn't convince Weasel-senpai with logic, but he could use his fears against him. It was a simple idea and a staple tool of any shinobi, but it was one that made Naruto hesitant to use against his ally. His friend. But what choice did he have? If he wanted to prove that he was a shinobi, he had to act like one. Even when it made him feel bad. Weasel-senpai. He's moving. Good. He had his senpai's attention. Time to bait the hook. The Uchiha. He's going after Sasuke Uchiha. The Anbu are being distracted. Naruto had never lied to Hiruzen, Kakashi, or Itachi. Never had he lied to any of his precious people. So when Weasel-senpai immediately leapt out the nearby window, Naruto didn't feel pride, he felt guilt. Overwhelming guilt. He'll get over it, kid. If you want to act, you best be careful. Naruto nodded his head in agreement, and was off. He made his way across the rooftops, effortlessly evading all Anbu patrols. He'd make his Hokage proud. He'd make Kakashi and I proud. And he'd find some way to apologize to Weasel-senpai. Maybe buy him a case of his favorite Pocky. Well, ask Kakashi and I to loan him the money to buy the Pocky if he couldn't convince Gigi to count this as his first mission. Actually, he'd probably have to think of a way to apologize to all three of them after tonight. Thus was Naruto's mind consumed on what he was going to say as he followed the Kumo ambassador towards the Hyuga compound. Maybe this wasn't the greatest idea. Itachi had crossed the village faster than he ever had before, and within a minute of reaching his clan's compound barreled into his younger brother's room through the windows, sword drawn and Sharingan moving about the room wildly. His entrance caused his brother to wake up with a cry of fright, and it wasn't much longer before his parents entered ready to assault Itachi before they realized who he was. Fugaku sheathed his kunai and narrowed his eyes. Itachi-kun, what are you thinking? The Kumo ambassador, where is he? Fugaku's eyes hardened and he snarled, so he's targeting the Uchiha then? Fool. Itachi ignored his father for the moment, and tried to find anything out of place, any sense of the ambassador's chakra. It could be that Itachi had gotten there early, but that was absurd. Naruto had been quite alarmed and he wouldn't have been so dire if the situation didn't necessitate it. At least the boy hadn't done so before now. As he had a moment to calm himself, Itachi started to get an uneasy feeling in his stomach. Father, watch over Sasuke. I'll go confer with the others outside the compound. The Uchiha patriarch nodded. The unspoken agreement that Itachi's best course of action was to confer with the Anbu was clear. As Mikoto sat on Sasuke's bed to comfort the young Uchiha, Itachi exited the way he came. After replacing his mask, he made his way to the nearest squad and landed beside their captain. Tiger-san, has the suspect been apprehended entering the Uchiha compound? The captain shook his head. No, Weasel-san. There have been no sightings or alerts. What made you think the ambassador was coming here? Naruto-kun informed me that he sensed a man was after Sasuke-kun. The tiger mask nodded once in understanding. We'll do another sweep of the borders of the compound, and we'll call a squad to guard the target. With another nod of his head, Tiger and his squad was off to do their duty. And Itachi's worry only increased. If the ambassador was not here already, then he wouldn't have been coming here. And if he hadn't been coming here, then Itachi Uchiha had been duped by a 4-year-old boy who used his gift to manipulate him masterfully. He didn't know if he was more proud of the boy or furious. As he raced off back towards the Sarutobi clan's compound, he only hoped the child had rethought his plan and returned back to the compound. If not, Itachi was going to be in some hot water with the Hokage. And that was if the boy wasn't harmed when he tried to save the day. Naruto listened to Kurama's instructions and diligently obeyed them. He could fool anyone in the world, but he couldn't lie to Kurama. They were too intertwined for either to fool the other, and that was the way Kurama seemed to like it. So he had to promise to listen to the fox's orders if he wanted his support in foiling the Kumo ambassador's plot. Naruto was well versed in the application of chakra, but he was young. He didn't have a lack of potential reserves to draw from. His chakra coils were weak and still developing. Even with the manipulation of the Kyuubi, his body was still too young to be a threat to a fully trained shinobi. At least, his body alone. His body had also been coaxed into becoming a perfect vessel as a Jinchuriki. His body was the strongest a humans could naturally be, and his affinity to housing and channeling the chakra of the Bijou was unmatched by anyone in shinobi history. At the moment, if he performed a perfect bond with Kurama and fought in tandem, he could maintain the full chakra cloak for approximately 5 minutes. But the seal was locked. The two had discovered that there was a key to the seal only recently in their attempts to decipher the Shikifujin. Until they found some way to gain the key or to unlock it through Fuinjutsu lockpicking, if that was even possible, Kurama could only imperfectly flood a single tail's worth of chakra, safely, into the 4-year-old. That'd give him 30 seconds of usage before it'd start to have an effect on his body. If he allowed Kurama control, it would be enough of a jump to have on the unsuspecting Kumonin. He quickly darted into the shadows of an alley as his target passed beneath him in the sewers. An interesting choice of movement, and a rather risky one. Anbu did indeed regularly patrol the underground tunnels, and if caught there weren't many means of escape. And unless he was extremely skilled in earth jutsu, tunneling out would be a 50-50 shot at best. The only time going in the sewers of an enemy village on such a mission would be if he had acquired the schedules for Anbu patrols. That was a troubling though. Made even worse as Naruto could sense that there were no Anbu anywhere near intercepting the ambassador. This was really bad. Really, really bad. Maybe he should have found some way to convince Itachi to accompany him. Thinking of his senpai made Naruto nervous for a completely different reason. Naruto! Focus! Naruto silently nodded his head and focused on the task at hand. He couldn't worry about the repercussions, he had to see his mission through. He had to be a shinobi. If he was stupid, then Gigi, senpai, and Kakashi and I would all be upset at him. And just feeling their disappointment and frustrations, the thought made him cringe. He hated when those he cared for felt those emotions towards him, so he'd make it so they wouldn't have to. He'd do his job perfectly, and they couldn't be mad. His vigor renewed, he tailed the shinobi across the village. It wasn't long before he began to believe he knew their destination, the Hyuga complex. So, Kumogaku was after the Byakugan. He stilled across the street from the complex as the ambassador rose from the manhole down the block. He peered around the corner of the building but could see nothing where he knew the man to be. He was quite skilled in infiltration, it seemed. Big surprise, Naruto realized. He shook his head and using the barest amount of chakra he scaled the wall. He noted that there was indeed an Anbu patrol but they were sedentary. Alert but not moving. How could they not sense? The Kumonin was gone. At least Naruto couldn't sense him at all. How was that possible? He could sense his emotions but they were muddled, and it was hard to pinpoint exactly where they were. It was as if his brain didn't know how to process his empathy anymore. Genjutsu. Naruto groaned and Kurama quickly disrupted his chakra system. With a start, Naruto realized that there was an extremely light buzzing noise in the back of his hearing. Smart. An auditory-based genjutsu. One that wouldn't immediately alert the clan with the eyes that can see chakra. Incredibly smart. They had really planned well for this mission. They better have if they had wanted to kidnap a citizen of Konohagakure if Naruto had anything to say about it. The young child swiftly flung himself up into the branches of a tree hanging above his perch and silently maneuvered from limb to limb, making sure to keep within a certain range of his target. His Gigi had taught him tree walking early on in order to assist his learnings of the monkey claw style. The style was the most useful when the practitioner of the style was amidst the branches of a tree. It gave the young boy a sense of belonging amidst the treetops of his home, and made him that more deadlier when acting within the forests of Hai no Kuni. Truth be told, Naruto had taken quite a liking to the style, in part to wanting to emulate one of the most precious and important people in his life and also in part to the maneuverability the style prompted. Where the Uchiha interceptor katas were quick, they were rigid upon defending. The elites of the Uchiha clan were the most dangerous when they were stationary and had clear range of vision. Their Sharingan gave them ample time to map out their opponent's next move, and the space gave them ample time to react to any incoming threat. The style was based around being able to counter strikes quickly while also allowing the shinobi to shift into casting a jutsu at any time. It was perfect to also counter foes who came at you en masse without the benefit of the Sharingan, though the style became next to useless. It was only Naruto's ability that allowed him to salvage as much as he could, twisting the style and perverting it to match his sensory power. That alone wouldn't be enough for him, though. It was the addition of the monkey claw style that would give the boy that edge he needed against foes that would normally overwhelm him. This is what Hiruzen and Weasel Senpai had told him many a time. Of course, they had meant in the future when he was an actual recognized shinobi of Konoha and not before his chakra coils were even finished developing. Nevertheless, it was his understanding of the monkey claw style that truly allowed the boy to not rouse his prey's suspicion. The infiltrator had managed to make his way unheeded by the Hyuga until he stood before a bedroom door. Naruto had to restrain himself until just after the man enacted his plot. He was facing a jounin. He was not even yet a genin. He couldn't fail here, there was too much at stake. He had to get it right. The man entered the room and grabbed a sleeping girl, ensnaring her in a genjutsu which she was helpless to resist. This was the moment that Naruto struck. He threw his training kunai at the man, making sure to toss two others on intercept paths in the two most likely routes of evasion. The would-be kidnapper dodged out of the way at the last second, evading the subsequent kunai easily, and launching two shuriken at Naruto's initial position. Naruto watched impassively from underneath his original perch, remaining calm as adrenaline pumped through his veins and the enemy shuriken sailed over him. The boy knew just how risky his current situation was in, and he knew the risk and what it could cost him. He wouldn't be rash. He'd prove that the lessons he'd been taught hadn't been given in vain. He'd act like a shinobi would. The Kumonin couldn't let any witnesses live, and every second that he was impeded from obtaining the package and retreating severely increased the chance of detection and mission failure. He'd have to take care of Naruto quickly. So he'd let the ninja come to him. So he waited. He didn't have to for long. The man blurred into his line of sight, and that's when Kurama flooded Naruto with his chakra. Naruto could taste the fear that suddenly flooded his enemy. He was a Kumogakure shinobi after all. He probably knew what Bijou chakra felt like better than any Konohanin. That hesitance was what allowed Naruto to slash forward with his hand and strike with the chakra cloak. Large gashes opened up on the would-be kidnapper's chest. Naruto moved quicker than he ever had and used his enemy's movements against him to swing around and grab the bag before pushing off with his feet. The force sent him, and the young girl, safely up to the roof, while it pushed the infiltrator forwards. Naruto frowned as the one-tail cloak dissipated, but then blinked and sighed in relief. The enemy nin turned around quickly, only to stare into the burning Byakugan of Hayashi Hyuga himself. The situation grew more dire as 10 other clan members stepped forwards from the shadows, all in the stance of the gentle fist. Surrender. Hayashi's voice was as calm as ever, but Naruto was nauseated by the emotions held underneath the surface. Naruto nearly jumped when he felt a hand rest on his shoulder, and he turned to see an identical, but less enraged, version of Hayashi. The man's eyes widened in surprise after finally noting who he was. Uzumaki-san? Naruto grinned sheepishly, and that nauseating feeling only grew as an Anbu squad materialized on the same rooftop. He paled as he stared into the emotionless mask of a weasel as the girl he had rescued was taken out of the bag and placed within the Hyuga's arms. Naruto nearly wished that he could control his gift, that way he wouldn't be able to sense his senpai's disappointment and rage, and even worse, his fears as to the condition he'd find Naruto in. Excuse us, Hizashi-san. My squad will escort the prisoner to Ibiki-san, but the Hokage wishes to see Naruto-san. Immediately. The Hyuga nodded and glanced to Naruto sympathetically, and the boy could only gulp as they shined away. Naruto gloomily sighed as he slowly copied down the excerpt of the dangers of fighting a superior opponent from the ninja guide for the 50th time. He was halfway done with the second half of his punishment, and he couldn't decide which half was worse. Having to look Hiruzenjiji, Itachi-senpai, and Kakashi and Ai-sen in the eyes and endure the sour waves of disappointment that oozed from them as he gave his debriefing or the menial and mindless task appointed to him. Even now he could sense Sarutobi-jiji eyeing him every now and then from his desk. He was broken out of his misery from the sound of a knock at the door. Hiruzen barely had time to call them to enter, before he had taken up the ceremonial position of a lower-ranked observing ward off to the side of the room. Hayashi Hyuga entered, and alongside him was the young girl Naruto had saved. The two Hyuga bowed in respect, and Naruto bowed back while Hiruzen nodded. Hayashi stepped forward. Hokage-sama, I'm here to inquire as to the fate of the infiltrator, and Hinata here has something to say to your ward. He gently bent down to push the girl, who was hiding behind his leg, forward, and she looked down. Naruto could sense her fears of disappointing her father, as well as her fears of being made fun of for her eyes and being called weak. Her mind seemed to hate herself, already. Naruto wasn't used to feeling these emotions from children around his age, and it was a little surprising. She quickly bowed. Thank you, Uzumaki-san. There was a short silence before her father lightly nudged her, and then she blushed in embarrassment and looked back to the floor. F for saving me. Thank you, sorry. Hayashi sighed, and the disappointment that he could not hide from Naruto made the boy frown. He schooled his features as he realized that the man had noticed and slightly frowned before he effortlessly assumed an emotionless mask. Naruto wondered why they didn't just model the Anbu masks after the face of Hyuga nobility. You have the thanks of the Hyuga clan, Uzumaki-san. Alongside my inquiries about the perpetrator, I'd also like to ask how you could detect him whilst my own clanmates were ensnared in his genjutsu. That is a clan technique, Hayashi, I'm sure you understand. Hayashi bent his head in acceptance, but Naruto sensed that Hayashi's pride was not satiated with that answer. And the Kumo ambassador, Hokage-sama? What is to be done with him? I will be sending him back with an escort to Kumogakure with a letter of his transgressions. The Hyuga's eyes didn't portray even an ounce of the rage Naruto sensed within him. This man was probably one of the best liars Naruto had ever met. The Raikage will deny any involvement, and will disavow and demote him. That's not justice. And a war over an attempted kidnapping is? If we return him, they can make no claims against us for breaking our treaty. He's alive and returned home. Kumogakure will be shamed, and they'll have to keep to the treaty and will have the higher moral ground. A political play? We give up justice to allow a fake peace. Yes. Naruto stiffened as the voice of the professor spoke for the first time that meeting. It is not up to man to pass judgment on our fellow men. Konoha gains more by following this path. There was a terse silence before Hayashi bowed one more time and left, Hinata quickly bowing as well and running after her father. After the door closed, Hiruzen sighed and relaxed into his seat. He thinks you're being weak. Thank you, Naruto-kun. You're afraid that is the case as well. The old man sighed once more and turned to look out at the village. Naruto wordlessly joined him, having to climb up the chair to be able to look out the windows. The sun was starting to set, and a light breeze made the treetops dance in the waning light. The village looked peaceful and beautiful. Naruto felt the Sandaime looking at him, but he couldn't tell what he was thinking. All he could sense were his fears and regrets swirling somewhere in the background, not currently at the forefront of the great shinobi's mind. I think you've done enough writing for today, Naruto-kun. I think it's important for us to start covering the politics of the daimyos, the 5 great nations, and the minor nations. Will start with the history of the warring clans era and go on from there. Hi, Hokage-sama. Hiruzen smiled. It was good to have a student once more. Kakashi lazily watched as Naruto leapt at him from the treetops. After another 6 months of training after the Hyuga incident, the boy was finally at genin level. At least in terms of physical strength. His chakra coils still weren't ready for continuous use, and it aggravated the child to no end. Kakashi, Itachi, and Hiruzen were all thankful for that fact. It kept the boy from progressing too far too soon. If the Uzumaki child had his way, he'd be on a genin team by now, if not apprenticed under one of his 3 mentors. The boy was a warrior more intellectual than his father, and he was slowly becoming more spirited than his mother. It was quite terrifying, the thought that Naruto could potentially surpass the Hokage in a decade or less. The child was special, and Kakashi had the Hokage's permission to push and challenge him lest his mind wander to other pursuits. Naruto was to be kept busy and guided. Sarutobi was adamant about not creating another Orochimaru. In truth, Hiruzen had sent word to Jiraiya about the boy, but he didn't know if his old student had received the message or not. The Toad Sage had been pretty beaten up when Minato had passed and, like Kakashi, had dove back into his work to escape reality. Kakashi knew that the Sannin could return in a month or in 10 years. There was no way to know how much time Jiraiya would need away from Konoha. Kakashi leaned back as the boy swiped with a clawed hand and sidestepped the boy's left leg. He was getting faster, and that was good. Speed was a cornerstone of his preferred style, and having it be one of the main things to improve was imperative. He ducked another kick and leapt back as the boy attempted to swipe his legs out from under him. The boy instantly transitioned to respond to Kakashi's actions before he committed him, his speed and strength being the only reason. He was just too slow to hit the jounin. He pulled out his book and read half a page as the boy panted in exhaustion. They had been at it for 4 hours now. Kakashi was impressed, as always, but he wouldn't let Naruto know that. Arrogance wasn't a useful trait for any shinobi. He tensed as the boy took a deep breath and then suddenly sprouted a chakra cloak. Not good. He finally decided to use his ace. He'd only be able to use it for 30 seconds, but that'd be the most tense 30 seconds of Kakashi's day. Kakashi instantly discarded Ika and uncovered his Sharingan as the boy flew at him faster than before. Kakashi leapt into the air, launching a kunai with ninja wire into a nearby tree. The boy's chakra claws speared upwards towards his location. 10 seconds. He pulled himself out of the way of the chakra claws, only for a third chakra arm to slice through his taut ninja wire, leaving him airborne without a means to redirect himself. A fourth chakra arm speared into him from behind and Kakashi's body disappeared with a puff of smoke to reveal that the chakra construct had pierced a log. Naruto snarled and turned to directly face Kakashi, who was hidden behind some trees. 20 seconds. The chakra arms flew towards Kakashi and he quickly dashed through the trees, circling the boy's position. He could feel the boiling chakra swipe right behind him and he dove back out into the middle of the clearing. 30 seconds. He widened his eyes in disbelief as the boy roared at him and charged, the cloak still active, his skin starting to peel off of his body and dissipating into the cloak. Before Kakashi could do anything, the child's eyes rolled back into his head and he collapsed onto the ground, the corruptive chakra incinerating the grass beneath him. After 2 seconds the chakra cloak disappeared and Kakashi wasted no time in picking up the boy and dashing towards the hospital. Like hell, he'd let one training session ruin the boy's life. He poured lightning chakra into his legs and ran faster than he ever had. His brother would not die today. Kabuto had a troubled life. A very troubled life. If you asked anyone else, they would actually say that it wasn't much of a life at all. But it was all the young man had. He didn't remember his parents, he didn't remember his own name, he only knew what was given to him. His name, Kabuto, from the orphans at the orphanage. His glasses from Nono. His training from Danzo, his adoptive mother's death at his own hands from Danzo. His new role from Orochimaru-sama. He didn't know who he was himself. Kabuto was a canvas and he had mastered changing and becoming whatever he was told to become. He hated how he felt. Even he didn't truly know who he was. Why should he? No one else knew who he was either, so why did it matter if he did? Except, it did matter to him. It kept him up at night. He was stationed back inside Konoha once more, under even Danzo's nose, and he didn't know if he hated the village that took his family from him, or loved how it made him remember when he was a true shinobi of the leaf, and how it made him feel that he belonged. As with everything else in his life, he felt indifferent to him. The village didn't give him anything now that its use for him had been used up. He was a spy now. And spies were everything and nothing. Kabuto hated being nothing. And that's what drove him forward with a nearly unmatched zeal into his studies and training his skills. It's what made him deadly. He perked up from his work on writing a file as he felt his supervisor's chakra signature approach his cubicle. He was years ahead of every nurse or doctor in this building, but it was necessary to blend in and that was hard to do from the limelight. So he found himself stuck in the lowly position of cubicle work most of the time. Kabuto, come. We have a special case, that could be quite the learning opportunity. Kabuto nodded politely, put down his pen, and followed quickly. He was led towards an emergency shinobi trauma room and almost blanched. He identified 2 of the chakra signatures inside as belonging to Hiruzen Sarutobi and Kakashi Hatake. Not a good sign. He was going through escape plans all the way across the threshold of the doorway, and even as he walked up to the side of the bed, a young child with blonde hair laid on it, and tossed and turned as his burned-off skin slowly regrew in front of their very eyes. Kabuto was astounded at the rate of natural healing. It was quite impressive. Orochimaru-sama would definitely be interested in hearing about this ability. This is patient Naruto Uzumaki. You will be in charge of his stay. Surprising. Kabuto outwardly blinked and glanced at his superior, eyeing the Hokage from the corner of his eye. Why me? He almost tensed when the professor took a step forward. Naruto-kun is a special child, and we believe that having a younger doctor, such as yourself, will put him at ease. Kabuto's eyes narrowed as he knew there was more that wasn't being told, but he merely nodded his head. He was a doctor of Konohagakure, a lowly genin, nothing more. I'll take good care of him. The Hokage nodded and left the room, starting to discuss something with the head doctor, and Kakashi gave Kabuto a penetrating stare. You better. A lowly doctor wouldn't scoff at the Jounin's threat, and so he didn't. Imagining the day he could shed the skin and rub it in the arrogant ninja's face was a strong secondary reaction instead. He took a second to look over the boy more intently, desperately ignoring the Anbu studying him from outside. This child was receiving more security than a clan heir would. He must be the Jinchuriki. Naruto opened his eyes after having a long discussion with Kurama and losing access to the badass chakra cloak and any training spars until he really understood the severity of abusing such a badass gift. Blah, blah, blah. Naruto knew that he shouldn't have pushed the limits of overusing Kurama's chakra. He knew how dangerous it was, but he couldn't help it. Kakashi had kept reading his book, and it was beginning to grate on Naruto's pride that he was only taken seriously when he fought as a Jinchuriki. He had apologized to Kurama, and accepted the additional punishment of feeling what he put his body through, and had woken up to feel his body on fire. His skin burned and his pain clouded his mind and made his vision blurry. He heard a mechanical beeping from a nearby machine quicken exponentially, and then he felt soothing, green chakra healing his body and numbing his nerves. The medic Nin worked diligently, and after a few minutes Naruto was able to open his eyes all the way and see clearly. His doctor was a surprisingly young. Naruto knew how hard medical ninjutsu was, and you had to be extremely proficient to be a doctor in the shinobi hospital. He had silver hair tied back with really non-assuming glasses. The doctor gave a warm smile and his eyes checked Naruto over for any injuries. He spoke, and the words were warm and kind. I'm glad to see you're doing so well, Naruto-kun. Naruto immediately tensed up as his fight or flight instincts kicked in. This was wrong. This was all wrong. Everything Naruto was seeing and hearing didn't even come close to what boiled beneath the surface of the man. Stop. Go away. Naruto began to panic and tried to leave his bed, and he began to struggle harder as his doctor began to physically hold him down. Naruto-kun. Stay still and calm down. I'm not going to hurt you. Naruto struggled, even as he sensed that the man was technically speaking the truth. He wouldn't hurt him right now. After a few more tries, Naruto took a quick breath and was about to call for the Anbu outside to aid him. He could sense that they were just out of earshot but within sight, and if he gave them the code they'd know that he was in trouble. It was as he moved his hand to the side, about to signal his guards, that he sensed something else within the man. Fear. Fear of being found out, fear of someone in Konoha, fear of Danzo. Naruto froze. His eyes searched the black eyes of the silver-haired man, and he relaxed against his pillow. You know Danzo? Killing me now won't help you. You serve Danzo then? Kabuto blinked and opened his mouth, and Naruto knew a sickly sweet lie was all he was going to hear, so he cut him off. You can't lie to me, and I know you don't serve him anymore. Now you serve Orochimaru? Really, that's not much better. Both men are callous manipulators with almost no degree of empathy, but you already know that by now. Naruto grinned at how flustered he was able to make the doctor. What's your name, by the way? And remember, I'll know if you lie. Kabuto. Kabuto frowned after he introduced himself to the boy. The boy was uncanny. He definitely needed to report this to Orochimaru-sama. Oh. No, you won't be telling him anything about this meeting, Kabuto-san. Kabuto withheld the urge to snarl and instead smiled politely. Of course, Naruto-san. May I inquire as to why you believe that, though? The ramifications for you should you do so are just not in your best interests. The reality that a 4.5-year-old was talking to him in this manner nearly threw Kabuto for a loop in and of itself, but for the child to, somehow, believe to have the upper hand in this standoff was just insulting. Strangely, as soon as he thought that, the boy pouted and looked to the side. Geez, don't treat me like a baby, Kabuto-san. Or I'll tell Kakashi and Ai-san that you're a spy. The thought of being forced to tangle with Itachi inside of Konoha with no support at this time was chilling. Haha. Yen-ni-san is pretty scary to fight against. It's why I'm here. That made the spy pause. The child was already sparring with Kakashi Hatake? That was very interesting. Kabuto was starting to get an idea of just exactly what made the Sandaime so protective of the boy. It might not hurt to just go with the flow of the conversation and see what he could find out. Can you read minds, Naruto-kun? Are you part Yamanaka? Naruto rolled his eyes and sighed. No, I'm not Yamanaka, I don't read minds. I can't tell you what I can do though, it's an important S-rank secret. Kabuto's eyes shined with interest and Naruto leaned forward. Now it's my turn. Why would you want to work for someone who isn't going to help you find out what you want to know? The boy was pretty presumptuous to think his technique, whatever it was, could accurately pinpoint anything that would shake Kabuto. He prided himself on his infiltration skills above all else, and this child was going to find that out soon enough. Orochimaru isn't such a bad. The boy frowned once more and leaned back. I said no lying. I'm not. Orochimaru isn't a bad person. No, you think he is sociopathic and murderous. You're just impressed with his power. Don't lie. Kabuto frowned. He promised to help me. Kabuto's blood began to boil when the boy simply laughed. You know he isn't going to give you exactly what you want. And what do I want, Naruto-san? The boy frowned in thought and was silent for a few seconds. You want to know who you are? But that's crazy, you're just you. Kabuto's brain started to run into overdrive trying to figure out what he'd done wrong and what had given him away. At the same time he became suddenly overwhelmed at having his secret desires brought to the light. In no way had he even expected the boy to be that intuitive, and as the waves of stewing emotions reached their boiling point inside of him the boy blinked. Oh. That's what the problem is. Orochimaru can't help you in the way you want, Kabuto-san, for the same reason that Danzo couldn't. That's because they don't actually care about you, but about your service. I know, Naruto-san. But there's much more to my situation than that. Yes, your mother no? Naruto tensed as he felt the killing intent, and he hastily waved his hands in front of himself. Whoa. Whoa, I'm sorry. I don't even realize that I speak what I'm processing out loud. And he stopped as Kabuto lightly pushed him back down so he was laying down in his bed. Kabuto, for all his intelligence, had never even predicted the chance he'd have a conversation with a Konohan child about his life and problems. It was the surreality of the situation that allowed him to sit down, and it was his curiosity that pushed forwards. Can you sense emotions? The boy flinched, and he felt a smug satisfaction. At least he wasn't the only one whose secrets were being unveiled in this little chat. Well, not all of them. I can't say any more, though you understand the importance of keeping secrets. Kabuto nodded slowly. He did. A silence grew between the two. Kabuto couldn't leave the boy with this knowledge. He couldn't risk it. But he couldn't kill him, and he wasn't a Yamanaka, and kidnapping the Jinchuriki wasn't possible. And as he thought of potential actions he watched the boy's face and realized that the boy knew what he was thinking, and he himself was at some form of impasse. Kabuto-san, I have an idea. The vulnerability present in the young child as he spoke was very surprising. It was then that Kabuto realized he was talking to a 4-year-old this entire time, and he could relate. If Naruto had been left at the orphanage, then maybe Danzo would have recruited him, maybe. He nodded his head silently to show he was listening, and the boy looked him straight in the eyes. What if we made a deal? I know who you are and I can help you find yourself, and in return you have to defect back to Konohagakure. Kabuto blinked. It was absurd. A childish idea. Naruto-san, you do realize that I was a Konohanin before, yes? And that if I truly rejoined the ranks that Danzo would. The boy frowned and nodded his head tersely. I know what he would do. No, you'd report to me. And I'd tell Hiruzenjiji what you tell me. Ludicrous. Laughable. Insanity. And how would this benefit me? The boy smiled. Because you wouldn't feel the pain or hatred that you do, and I'd keep you safe. The final 5 words were said so innocently, but with such conviction, that Kabuto felt his will weakening. Logically, he should kill the boy now. Take the body and flee the village, but the boy, even in how he presented himself, he just reminded Kabuto of the orphans in Nono's orphanage. The longing to belong was there, and really, he was getting the objectively better end of the deal if the child could pull through on his promise. If he could somehow get sanctioned by the Sandaime, it felt crazy, but right. For the first time in years, Kabuto recognized the will of fire burning once more. He was quick to keep a lid on it, lest the boy realize how much he longed for exactly what was being offered. Instead, he just gave a polite smile. I'll think on it, Naruto-san. Tomorrow, we can discuss it more. What do you say? The boy gave a wide grin, as if he had just won some form of battle, and held out his hand. I think we're going to be great friends, Kabuto-kun. Perhaps we will, Naruto-kun. Kabuto came early the next morning to check in on Naruto, and was only slightly surprised to find the boy perked up and waiting for him. He had expected the boy to sleep longer, considering his age. It seemed that he should have known that he'd be disappointed. The boy started jabbering excitedly as Kabuto methodically examined his vitals. The spy had spent all night up and going over his options, planning for each and every eventuality. He came to the conclusion that he could not fool the boy. At least, he couldn't without additional data. It didn't seem possible to fool him, so he had to test the child. See just how insightful he really was. He paid half attention to the ramblings of the child as he reached in his coat for a syringe. It was filled with a low-intensity toxin, potentially fatal if not treated within 72 hours. He gave the boy a smile as he administered the dosage to the child's fore. The boy watched him silently as he injected the toxin, curiosity in his eyes. "Are you trying to kill me, Kabuto-kun? I thought we moved past this yesterday." The boy pouted and crossed his arms, and once more, Kabuto was surprised yet again. The child didn't even seem upset. "Of course not, Naruto-kun, but you knew that, didn't you?" The boy gave a sheepish grin, and Kabuto found that he actually did have a limit to his patience, and he was approaching it. "How long did you know that I didn't intend to kill you?" 10 minutes ago, when you entered the building, Kabuto-kun." Kabuto didn't know how to respond. This whole scenario was insane. There was no precedent in his experiences to take note from. He had wanted to test the boy, test the scope of his powers, and the whole thing had ended the second he had entered the building. He was slowly beginning to accept that the child was a prodigy to end all prodigies. At least, as far as sensory abilities went. "Do you want to be a shinobi, Naruto-kun?" He watched as the boy grinned, nodded, and spouted his dreams of being the Hokage. He watched for signs of childish delusions, weaknesses, or logical fallacies. He found none. At least, none below the surface. The child was energetic and rambunctious, but his eyes showed the real picture. No matter how bright they shined, there was an eternal gleam of insight that made Kabuto wary. He didn't know if that was relieving or just more worrying. "Naruto-kun, I think we should talk about our current situation." "I think so too, Kabuto-kun. You've been worried about it all morning. We need to talk it out, and then when you agree we have to start working on your lying." "My lying?" Naruto nodded sagely, his small head nodding in the oversized hospital gown accentuating the absurdity of the gesture. "You need to become a better liar if you're going to fool Orochimaru." "To fool Orochi?" "Yes." Naruto actually tried to get up. Kabuto quickly pushed him back down, but he couldn't stop the boy from ranting. "This isn't a game. I know what position you're in, and the only way for you to be safe from here on out is if the only person you can't fool is me. I can sense every negative emotion inside you, Kabuto-kun. I can tell how conflicted you are right now. Afraid, yes, afraid." The boy shut his rebuttal down before he could even open his mouth. "I can sense hatred in you. Lots of it. You look down on others, envy people for their happiness, their identities, but you regret what you've become. Not a lot. But you've fooled yourself with how buried it is. But I can sense it. I can sense everything." The child sighed, and withdrew into himself for a moment. Kabuto could see the barest of twitches in his face, hinting at reflexive expressions forming, almost as if he was having another conversation. Although, as a Jinchuriki, it's entirely possible that the boy was never alone. Whether that was good or not was yet to be seen, but he was looking out for Kabuto's safety. The boy clearly already saw him as an asset. Kabuto wasn't comfortable with it. He had grown accustomed to serving people more powerful than him. People that thought they understood him, but they never did. Not completely. That was what gave him security. Should things not look good for him, he always had a backup plan, an escape route. He could strike before they could. They were stronger than him, but he could deceive them. This boy was weaker than he was, but he could not fool him. He didn't have that safety if he were to work underneath Naruto. He also was still not over the fact that the most unsettling person who would seek his loyalty was a child. There were many dangers that also came with following Naruto. The boy was a Jinchuriki. Whilst Orochimaru may not be interested in the boy yet, there was another man who thought he had made Kabuto his spy, Sasori, who had ordered Kabuto to be mindful of the topic of any Jinchuriki or Bijou. Sasori was part of some very secretive society or organization that could mean a large force of ninjas seeking the Jinchuriki in the future. Then there was the fact that Naruto was loyal to Konoha and had no real political clout to protect Kabuto. Until he did, then Kabuto's relationship could only ever be unofficial, and if he was found out it would be bad for both of them, though worse for Kabuto. And on top of that, the child was the son of the fourth Hokage, and there was no way that Iwagakure was going to let him live for long. It would be suicide. Kabuto gained a grip on his thoughts as they quickened in pace and intensity. The boy was watching him, and Naruto had given away crucial information earlier on. The boy could sense every negative emotion. It was only safe to assume that Naruto had sensed Kabuto's every thought already. It certainly made communication much easier. Though he was finally starting to realize he truly couldn't lie to Naruto. That was also worrisome. What would you require from me? The boy perked up, almost as if he hadn't known what Kabuto would choose. Something for future deliberation. Well, I don't know. If you know stuff that might help Konoha or save lives, tell me? But if it's too dangerous, don't. I want you to be as safe as you can be in MO. You can't lie to me and you have to honor your word. You can't break a promise, and I promise that I won't break any of mine. The boy held out a hand, and they both held a breath. The boy didn't know if he would shake and Kabuto didn't know if he would either. It was dangerous. The boy wasn't as strong as Orochimaru. Yet. But Kabuto wasn't thinking long-term. The boy was the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune and son of the Yellow Flash. He was 4-ish years old and had brought Kabuto into a checkmate. He only needed time and then he could become as strong as Orochimaru. Stronger. Not only that, but the child was a good person. Kabuto couldn't detect a hint of malice or malign intent if he didn't join. Then he was declaring he would serve Orochimaru, serve against Konoha, and he would be making a powerful enemy. That thought teased Kabuto's imagination into painting a portrait of the shinobi the boy could become. He ran a quick analysis of the boy's chakra and intellect now and made a quick and dirty guesstimate of the boy's strength in the future, his power being able to inspire real loyalty and cut corruption and treachery at its roots. Kabuto could imagine one root he'd love to see burn from the greater tree of Konoha. Yes, it was dangerous. But Kabuto was now beginning to see the potential of the situation. Naruto professed a desire to be Hokage and already he was working those around him. He was attempting to seduce Kabuto into defecting to his banner. The child's face grimaced at the darkest interpretation of his actions, but Kabuto paid it little mind. This was too much. Kabuto had gone his entire life being denied what he desired at every turn to have it all right here in front of him. That was why he was hesitating. It was too good, and yet if he passed it up now. His eyes steeled as he stretched out his hand to shake the hand of his new leader. He was worried and uncertain, but he was also proud. He felt the will of fire burning within him once more. His smile matched Naruto's, and he didn't even have to fake it. It was the middle of summer in the village, and the warmth saturated the air and carried the sounds of a bustling village quite easily. The Sarutobi clan compound was on the northern outskirts of the village proper. It was one of the closest compounds to the Hokage Monument and the Hokage Tower respectively. Hiruzen took the time to allow the ambience of the perfect day to wash over him as he ate an early breakfast. Talks with Kumogakure had picked up after their kidnapping attempt of Hinata Hyuga. The poor child was nervous for a while, but had seemed to settle down after a while. A tragedy that the shinobi world was still so uncaring to its children, its future. It had taken months, but the Yandame Reikage, was finally forced to commit to the treaty, lest their subterfuge be shown to the world. Shinobi being underhanded wasn't anything new, but getting caught was always just bad business, no matter who found out. It could be seen as a sign of weakness for Kumo, whilst being a sign of strength for Konoha. Konoha had even shown mercy and spared the infiltrator. All in all, it wasn't very enthusiastic to let the story leak out. So, they would be convening for a peace accord. He wanted to enjoy his time as much as he could before the trip. The odds of anything happening were slim, but every time a Kage left their village there was a chance they wouldn't return. This was what was the only thing troubling him, whether he should bring Naruto or not. The boy would be an incredible asset, and could further enforce a true accord, but he hadn't determined if securing a true treaty was worth revealing the asset they had in Naruto so early. Speaking of the boy, Sarutobi smiled from across the table as Naruto ate a larger-than-normal breakfast across from him. After having come home from the hospital, the boy was back to his normal self. The boy was a few months away from turning 5 and he had grown quite a bit. Sarutobi knew that he had a decision to make, and he had wanted to talk to Kakashi about it first, but Danzo had surprised him by popping into his office yesterday before he picked Naruto up from the hospital. It appeared the old Warhawk was starting to come to the same conclusion that Hiruzen had. Naruto should either enter the academy or go straight into an apprenticeship. Sarutobi had accepted that the life he wanted for the boy would never come to be. He knew the boy would beg to finally go to the academy, and he would understand what that meant better than anyone else his age, but still it was a heavy burden to force onto any child. That being said, he had no intention of letting Danzo take over his training. That was why Naruto was already looking at him with a face of pure excitement. There really wasn't keeping anything secret from the Uzumaki. Really, Gigi? I can go to the academy, or? Yes, Naruto-kun, which do you think would be a better choice? Naruto hummed to himself and thought. What do you think, Kurama? I think you shouldn't wake me from a nap to answer a silly question. You already know everything that school would teach you. Naruto nodded along, a small frown indicating how hard he was thinking on the matter. Yeah, but I would be able to make friends join a genin team. I don't think that would work, Naruto, I don't think that they would accept you. I may be wrong, but I think you know what you should do. Naruto sighed and then smiled softly. I think that I should take up an apprenticeship. GG, I don't think the academy is for me. I'm too different. Hiruzen gave a soft smile and walked over to pat Naruto's shoulder. It's okay, Naruto. I understand. Did you have any idea of who? Naruto nodded excitedly. What about Weasel Senpai? I'd love to learn from him. The god of shinobi nodded his head, and Naruto was ecstatic when he realized that Sarutobi approved of his choice. The old man smiled softly. I'll talk to him about it. Thank you, Gigi. Naruto coughed as he landed on the ground once more. Weasel had dragged him out to a training ground and had told him that he was to be his new sensei. Right as Naruto cheered, he had kicked out his legs and sent Naruto into the dust. He then began asking questions, and every time Naruto answered wrongly, their next exchange was especially brutal. Naruto groaned as a hand dragged him to his feet before he swung wildly, hoping to surprise his sensei with a kidney shot. No such luck. Who are you? I am Naruto Uzumaki. Kick. Dodge. Jump. What guides your blade? The will of fire. Backflip. Kicked in the stomach, spring off the ground. What are you, Naruto? The weasel mask he once associated with safety and protection appeared in his vision before pain blossomed from his chest as his sensei buried his knee in it. A shinobi. What is a shinobi, Naruto-kun? Naruto hastily dodged a right hook and threw a counter as he ducked. A soldier, Weasel Sensei. His fist hit nothing as his sensei leapt back. Dodge the following shuriken. Throw his kunai. Jump. Dodge. Jump. Attack. What does a shinobi fight for, Naruto-kun? A kick out of nowhere knocked Naruto on his side and he rolled to minimize the impact. Their Kage. He gasped for air as his sensei remained hidden until a vicious attack clued him in that he had answered wrong. Wrong. Their village. Weasel furiously barraged Naruto with attacks and only stopped when Naruto fell to his knees and spat up blood. The red dropped from his mouth and fell down onto the grass beneath it, and staining it red. We start the timer over now. Begin again. What are you, Naruto? A shinobi. Kakashi grinned as he watched his sensei's son idly drawing in the Hokage's office. Such thoughts of his departed sensei brought up his grief, and the ray of sunshine would always pause when he sensed those feelings, to look up and just smile at Kakashi. The boy, burdened with the loss of his parents, and being reminded by it constantly from Kakashi's memories, always tried to comfort his brother as his first reaction. It would usually make himself feel guilty for consistently bombarding the boy with these feelings, and that would usually end up with the boy sensing such, and walking over to grab his hand. Luckily, he was able to restrain himself this time, and merely smiled back behind his mask. Day by day, his guilt was slowly diminishing. That was a miracle in and of itself. The death of his father Sakumo had destroyed him. He had broken into shards and his personality had been just as cutting as broken glass. He had been so destroyed. It hurt, to this day, to think back on those memories. He had hated his father and dedicated himself to the lifestyle of the shinobi. It was only thanks to his team, to his sensei, Minato, that he ever got back to normal. Or, well, as close to normal as he could get. He had made quite a reputation for himself as a lazy, untimely, smut-reading pervert, and to be honest, he had been too lazy to actively try to change that perception. Which gave the lazy part of his reputation hold more weight than it should for any shinobi. That's not to say the death of his team, or sensei, had made him falter as a shinobi in any sense. He had never trained harder. The only reason he wasn't listed as an S-rank shinobi in any bingo book was due to the fact that he was the acting Anbu commander. He had a moment where he faltered after Minato passed a period of time in which he let his grief consume him. It was thanks to Naruto that he was shocked out of it. The boy had done what no one ever truly had and eased his guilty conscience. That is to say, every time he saw the boy, the child would go out of his way to make him feel better, and it really worked. The man he was nowadays was stronger, and not just in terms of physical might or skill. He was stronger in spirit, and more than he ever had been. Minato, Rin, and Obito had taken a shattered ball of glass and had been able to smooth out the edges. Naruto had been able to reforge the glass and fill in his cracks. The child had made Kakashi whole in ways he never even knew he was empty. That was the power of the boy and why he had needed to get as strong as he could to protect him. If the boy hadn't have had his gift, he would have been content to remain stagnant, float in his grief, until the boy was of age to need a Jounin sensei. He would have been content to leave the boy without interacting with him for more than a decade. It would have been a mistake, and all he would have to excuse it were cowardly defenses. Though if that had happened, Kakashi could admit that he wouldn't have been the best guardian for the boy either. He wouldn't have been a sufficient parent, and couldn't have looked after him solely, but he could have been an elder brother figure, much that he was now. It was a simple irony that after having the boy heal him of his past regrets, he would find his time spent regretting actions he hadn't taken, but might have. Of course, the boy was also very helpful in de-stressing Kakashi from the clutches of his new position. Leading an Anbu team and losing a member was one thing. Leading every team, every loss could trace back to him. And whether the fault lied at his feet or not, Kakashi found himself helpless but to blame himself. He was a creature of guilt and grief. It was the natural action for him to take. Naruto made it all worth it. He would have fought against countries for his old team or Minato. He'd fight the world to protect Naruto. Thankfully, he wasn't the only person that was looking out for the boy nowadays. Hiruzen Sarutobi and Itachi Uchiha were probably the best caretakers he could have asked for to watch over the boy. Usually all three saw eye to eye. That's why when he disagreed with either of them, it was enough to get him a bit antsy. It's never a good thing for shinobi to get antsy. Today was shaping up to be one of those days. I'm serious, Kakashi. I'm bringing Naruto-kun with me. The Hokage was going to the summit to meet with the 4th Raikage, and he wanted to bring Naruto with him. Now this put Kakashi in a situation he never thought he'd be in. He never imagined that the Hokage himself might be a threat to Naruto. Before he could pull the brakes on his subconscious, he had already gone through contingencies of grabbing Naruto and going rogue. It wasn't ideal, but if his leader was going to recklessly endanger Naruto now, then he'd only be more brazen in the future. It was only Kakashi's trust in Hiruzen that allowed him to break through that train of thought to allow the Hokage to say his piece. He wasn't so naive as to not immediately associate his commander's smile with the god of shinobi, having guessed what had just ran through his mind. It was filled with pride at how far he'd go to protect Naruto, but he was lucky the Hokage was merciful. His behavior had bordered on treason. He couldn't protect the boy if he was executed for his thoughts. Of course, Naruto chose that moment to grab his hand, and he realized that he had needed the additional comfort from the child anyways today. Oh, these sweet, little ironies. Could Itachi-san not watch him? Naruto cocked his head to the side. Weasel-sensei's name is Itachi? Whoops. The Sandaime sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose as Kakashi chuckled sheepishly. It was a minor flaw, but he let down his guard around Naruto. It was minor, but it was still a flaw. Itachi is out on an assignment. I will be taking him with me so that he can learn about diplomacy and see some more of the world that lies beyond our walls. Danzo has also been showing an increased interest in the boy. I won't leave him unwatched. Kakashi nodded and immediately relaxed. Better at the Hokage's side than vulnerable to the tender mercies of Root. Poor Tenzo hadn't yet fully recovered from his time as Kino, and he knew that Team Ro was doing well under Itachi's leadership, but he missed seeing the Mokuton user regularly. Perhaps Naruto could help Tenzo heal as he had Kakashi. Actually, the boy might helpful to healing all the Anbu, being able to accurately pinpoint each individual's problems more efficiently than a Yamanaka could. Honestly, the boy could become an honorary member. Running a few select safe missions with Team Ro would do the boy wonders with experience. More than he'd learn at the academy. He'd talk about that later with the Hokage. As you wish, Hokage-sama. Won't the Raikage be suspicious of him accompanying you? Yes, which is why I think it's a good idea to create another persona for young Naruto-kun. Itachi-san has professed a desire to allow Naruto to work with his Anbu team in controlled settings. He can't do so as Naruto Uzumaki. Today was definitely one of those days, but maybe in a good way. I was just thinking the same thing, Hokage-sama. He'd need a code name. He turned to Naruto, who was still holding his hand and yet met his eyes with unnerving intelligence. What would you like your name to be, Naruto-kun? I'd like to be called Konoha. Kakashi blinked and Hiruzen let out a loud laugh. Kakashi chuckled. Naruto-kun, usually Anbu choose animals too. Actually, Kakashi, I think that's a fine name for him. Kakashi couldn't tell who had the wider grin, Naruto or Hiruzen, and he doubted even his Sharingan would clue him in. Hiruzen smiled as he handed Naruto a blank Anbu mask. The only defining feature of it was the symbol of Konohagakure upon the brow and its 2 eye holes. It was smooth and featureless, and lacking anything else made it unnerving. It was definitely one of a kind. The boy was ecstatic as he took it in hand and put it on his face. It fit snugly, and he looked up to meet Sarutobi's eyes, and Hiruzen couldn't stop the pang of both pride and sadness at the sight. The boy was almost 5 years old, and he had been placed within the Anbu. Disregarding that it was a special placement, and was in no way a fully fledged member, the history books wouldn't remember that. They'd remember the fact that the Sandaime Hokage, in a time of peace, placed his predecessor's 4-year-old son within the most twisted branch of the Konoha military body. That was the objective fact. The youngest member to ever join Anbu was now 4 years old. And it almost broke his heart, but it was the best choice to protect Naruto. Anbu were the elite, and they were a family unto themselves. Whether you were active or retired, Once you put on the mask, your family grew exponentially. They might not be his friends, or respect the boy yet, but they would die for him. They would have died for any civilian or citizen of Konoha, but they'd be more aware of him now. They'd be watchful, if not only to make sure he lived up to the new brotherhood he belonged to. Anbu was for life. And Naruto needed that protection. He needed the might of Konoha at his side at all times until he could protect Konoha with only his might. There was the blood of a Hokage within him, and a bijou in his belly. Naruto was special. That was what let Sarutobi sleep at night. The boy was trembling with joy, but did not give any childish exclamation of joy or pride. The boy had been painfully observant of the Anbu over the past few days, forgetting that his gaze forced the Anbu to relocate if they were hiding. Hiruzen was amused to find that the Anbu had discovered 12 new hiding spots within his office over the span of an hour. Not that it lasted long. But, after Hiruzen gave a quiet cough, the boy had jumped and realized what he had been facilitating: Anbu musical chairs. He hadn't missed his guard's sighs of relief. Word had quickly made its way through the Anbu and they more or less knew what was going to happen. The Hokage's ward was going to become an honorary member, and even run missions with the esteemed Team Ro. It was almost ludicrous if those rumors hadn't been spread by Inudano himself. Sarutobi was nearly exasperated. Over the course of 2 days it seemed as if almost every Anbu had circulated through the office to get a first impression of a boy. They had then been shocked to realize that the stories of Team Ro and a few others about the boy had been true. His sensing abilities were unimaginably powerful. Not a single one had been able to hide their presence, though a few had evaded his sight. The boy was still somewhat susceptible to genjutsu, especially Kurama didn't deem the caster as a threat. The boy had eventually gotten bored of trying to find the Anbu agents but had answered the Hokage promptly and accurately each time he asked the boy how many were in his office at any given time. It was quite impressive. The Anbu thought so as well. Word had even spread to some of the lower-ranking shinobi, and Hiruzen had to have a talk with Shikaku Nara, the Jounin commander, about why stopping such rumors about a new Anbu initiate was imperative for the safety of Konoha. Once you piqued a Naruto's curiosity, it was never sated. That being said, a few Anbu paid a remedial visit to TNI for letting such sensitive information slip. It was Naruto himself who was able to identify the guilty parties, and verify their identity when they came forward to accept punishment. Hiruzen still had it verified through other means. He had learned his lesson of trusting the boy too implicitly, even if it did bring a guilty pout on the boy's face. He never complained, knowing that was the consequence for lying to Itachi and going against the Hokage's orders once. He was relieved that the boy was already acting the part of shinobi elite, but it was a tad unsettling all the same. He reached down and placed the boy on his back and grinned as his young ward whined, "Gigi. I can run." "Yes, Naruto-kun, but you aren't yet as fast as me or my guards. I'd enjoy the break from having to run in the future. I may need you to carry me." That made the boy giggle, and still smiling, Hiruzen left the gates of Konohagakure towards the land of iron. I was not pleased to be here and was not pleased with the series of events that led him to being here. His advisor, Darui, had warned him that trying to snatch the Hyuga heiress was likely to backfire, but he had been confident in the men he had chosen, and also in the rage of the Hyuga. To be disappointed twice over was infuriating. More so was the Hokage's response. I had never been a true believer of diplomacy, believing military might to be the best bargaining chip, but even he could see how damaging turning down the Hokage's request would be for his village. As the Reikage, he was bound to do his best to protect them, even if it meant meeting with the old monkey. With him he brought Killer B and 5 Anbu. Normally, he'd have brought less, and not even brought B, but this wasn't just any diplomat. This was the god of shinobi. And he didn't believe the rumors that had been spread in the wake of the Yondaime Hokage's death. He knew Bijou didn't die. B had confirmed that fact. Konoha still retained the Kyuubi and were hiding it in an attempt to propagate the image that they weren't mobilizing their forces and honestly sued for peace between nations. It was a load of shit, and they didn't buy it. He entered the room the samurai were hosting the talks at and bristled. The Hokage had 2 Anbu guards behind him and an infant sitting beside him, masked with an unusual mask bearing the insignia of Konoha. I wasn't pleased to be here. He wasn't pleased to be forced to diplomacy. And he most assuredly hated being thrown off by the sheer gall of the smiling monkey sitting across from him. That feeling only increased as the child sputtered in shock, slammed his hands onto the table, and shouted at him, "The Reikage! Hokage-sama isn't a monkey!" Wasn't pleased. I was not pleased. Hiruzen could see that the second the Yondaime Reikage had entered the room. He had never known him to be a patient or diplomatic man, and it seems that some things hadn't changed. The man had brought a rather impressive guard to boot. He was rather content with his own guard, trusting in the expertise of Boar, Cat, and Konoha. It was a shame, That flush of pride he felt at the thought of an agent code-named as Konoha was overcome by a sigh as said operative gave in to his childish impulse to respond to some thought he was sure the Raikage had upon seeing him. Though, he thought he'd have gained more respect than to be referred to as a monkey from his fellow Kage even if that reference was in the privacy of their thoughts. Raikage Dano. I apologize on behalf of my subordinate's outburst. I'm sure that we could start these peace accords with an honest intent amongst ourselves to do our best to come together. It would be greatly beneficial for both of our villages. I gave a grunt and sat down at his seat, his right hand, a man listed in the bingo books as Darui, doing so as well. The samurai mediator sat equidistant between both parties off to the side, silent until any trickery began. I crossed his arms and leant forwards. I seek to come to a peaceful resolution as well, Hokage Dano. He's lying. Sarutobi made no movement that he had heard the response from Konoha beside him, but A's focus immediately shifted back to the unknown Anbu agent at his side. Having Naruto don this persona would be for nothing if they didn't employ his talents. They even had a perfect cover for him to be introduced this way to the Raikage. A was rash, bold, reckless, and hated politics. He would not be riled by a fellow Kage, but he'd fall prey to manipulation from someone he saw as inferior to his position. A position that Naruto could easily employ. As A bristled, Darui narrowed his eyes at the masked ninja alongside the Hokage. It seemed the Raikage's hand would not be so easily fooled. Excuse me? What is this, Sarutobi? Was this meeting not between the Kage of our villages? The large, shirtless man faced Konoha and growled, You shouldn't throw up baseless accusations, boy. Sarutobi took his time and slowly took out a scroll. All the ninja tensed as he unraveled and looked upon it, even young Naruto, to his pride. His eyes slowly scanned over the blank scroll and raised a brow. Is that so, Raikage Dano? You have no further plans to kidnap a child holder of one of Konoha's Kekkai Genkai? That was all he was told Naruto would need. A shinobi was to be a master of their body, being able to give no tell of guilt one way or another. Kages were steps above the mere rabble, holding all of their village's most valuable and dire secrets. Their minds were another matter. Some things can't be trained or controlled. Hence, why the Yamanaka before Naruto were so sought after and vital to counterintelligence. Yet, even the Yamanaka would struggle to pull the secrets out of the mind of a Kage. It was good fortune, then, that Naruto was not a Yamanaka. His abilities far outshone theirs. Naruto nodded, and Sarutobi wanted to snarl beneath his grandfatherly smile. He passed the scroll over to the boy, his eyes never leaving the Raikage. What intelligence did you gather in Kumo, Konoha-san? Those across from them immediately tensed at the casual admittance of infiltration and espionage. If only they knew the truth. They would find no trace of Agent Konoha within their ranks, and that would only make them believe it all the more. Naruto took the scroll and made as if he was reading off the empty parchment. In event that the Hyuga abduction was unsuccessful, the next operation would target the Uchiha clan, aiming for the youngest son of Fugaku. Sarutobi gave a sigh, acting as if the news wasn't surprising to him. He wanted to laugh at the gall of the leader across from him. The Uchiha. There had been wars started over less. Hell, the Hyuga incident was cause enough to start a war. Danzo had advised as much himself. You seem keen on taking advantage of my hospitality, Raikage Dano. Are you so surprised that I did not have operations in motion to be ready for this eventuality? Your village has desired Kekkai Genkai for a long time. I also am becoming tired of being ignored in my quest for peace. I thought that I'd acquire leverage targets that would disable Kumo's stance as one of the Great Five. The boy slowly took out a brush and started writing names. Sarutobi marveled at the accuracy of his perceptions through merely emotion. He also shivered at the sudden thought of what could have happened if Naruto was born in another nation. Naruto handed the scroll and nodded. Specifically, it seems, your two Jinchuriki killer bee and Yujito-ni? The Raikage seemed to take the threat seriously, seeing as he immediately was on his feet and smashed the table in front of him with his fists. The samurai mediator was on his feet immediately. Lords, please contain your tempers. Sarutobi smirked, and that did little to calm his fellow Kage, of course. I would never threaten the life of a Kumo shinobi whilst in the middle of peace talks. Surely you know this, Raikage Dano. I don't appreciate having your spying attempts thrown into my face, Hokage Dano. Especially when you're gloating about them. Hiruzen shrugged and rolled up the scroll. I wouldn't have brought it up if there wasn't anything to mention. I was saddened that you still were not being honest with me, Raikage Dano. I had hoped to truly join our nations together. A sat back down in his chair, idly kicking the rubble of the table away from him. Darui seemed to sigh and looked away, but Hiruzen saw that his attention was now focused on Naruto. The treaty is still official, is it not, Hokage Dano? Sarutobi snorted and drew yet another growl from A. The treaty your ambassador ignored upon its commencement day, on your orders? Yes, it's still official. Whether I push for additional addendums in face of your violation of it is what this meeting is supposed to establish. If you break it, no shinobi village will entreat with you, you know this. And I have word that your daimyo is not so excited by this blunder of yours, Reikage Dano. I growled, but seemed to take the lie easily enough. It seems Naruto's performance and spot-on intel had thrown him off. You're just as insufferable as the Namikaze was, Sarutobi. Naruto tensed at the mention of his father, and Darui's eyebrow raised. Oh boy, that wasn't good. You'll find that the will of fire is quite an influencing ideology, Reikage Dano. A waved his hand dismissively. So, what is the point of all this, Sarutobi? I don't like you or your village, my village doesn't like your village, and you don't trust us. Let's just let the treaty stand and continue as we have? I want there to be peace, eh? Even Naruto flinched from the voice that escaped the aging leader of the Leaf. The times were few and far between when Hiruzen Sarutobi lost his temper, but when he did, all that experienced it would remember it. He sighed for near the 7th time this meeting and sat back down. I apologize, Samurai-san, Reikage Dano. The samurai gave him a curt nod and grudgingly did the same. What would take it for you to believe me, Reikage Dano? Do I have to declare war to demand my wishes be honored? Is that what you wish? To test your mettle against Konoha? Do you think us weak? No, but when you come here and... I apologize, Reikage Dano, but I was not yet finished. I will give you a stark reminder, and I hope you listen to it. I am the Hokage, but you know I only have so much power. If you keep poking the sleeping bear that is my village, there will only be one answer. Though you may take it as a slight against your nation's pride, I urge you to remember there hasn't been a shinobi war that Konoha has not won. You are old, Hokage Dano, and the Yondaime is dead. I am the fastest man in the world now. I wonder how much your ninja would appreciate seeing what happens to their ranks when one that holds that title goes up against them. Kages don't win wars. You know this to be true. Don't forget the Sannin. I gave a laugh and leaned forward. You're right, perhaps I should seek out your old student that ran away, as Sarutobi? Naruto suddenly spoke out. He's scared, Hokage-sama. That was the tipping point. In a flash, A was in front of the boy, a fist barely away from his nose. He was staring at the boy blankly even as Sarutobi held a kunai to his kidney. If this child speaks one more time. You have no negotiating power here, Reikage Dano. What is he, a Yamanaka? Are you reading minds here, Sarutobi? Hiruzen gave a soft laugh and shook his head. There is no Yamanaka here, Reikage Dano. Just an inspired shinobi who holds true to the will of fire. Already training another successor? He looks a little young. Hiruzen nodded instead of disagreeing. He hadn't lied to himself. Naruto made a strong nominee for Hokage. But that was far in the future. Very far, if he had anything to say about it. He had not been excited to come out of his retirement, but the weight of age had been shaken off. He wouldn't allow his age to inhibit his decisions. He had to fight harder, to be fiercer than he ever was if he was to keep Konohagakure safe. It was one of the few instances that Danzo had actually approved of his choice. Reikage Dano, I think it's time to come to the meat of the matter. Let's talk about terms that will encourage both of our villages to work together, and eventually see each other as true allies. There should be no compromise between shinobi, Sarutobi. The insufferable Kage across from him crossed his arms and frowned. But I suppose I don't have a choice. We'll try to make this work, but Kumo will only uphold this treaty as long as its needs are respected as well. Or until we have the upper hand, went unsaid, but it was a step in the right direction. Hiruzen could work with this. He was pleased. Naruto watched some samurai practicing their swordsmanship from a balcony. The talks had ceased for the day, and he was stationed to overlook the courtyard to guard the Hokage. He liked being part of the Anbu. He belonged there. None of the others cared about who he was. For the first time in his life he felt like he truly belonged. And he got to be a shinobi. Without going to the academy. He had always been scared that he'd go there, and the other children would make fun of him. Whenever his Gigi had taken him to the park in the past, whenever Naruto would be off by himself, the other kids would pick on him and call him names. Eventually, Hiruzen had found out, and they had stopped going out during conventional times, but he had already decided that children were just mean. Except for the Hyuga girl Hinata. She had been very nice. She still made him slightly uncomfortable with all her insecurities, though. It wasn't anything against her. In fact, he felt bad for her, but in individuals like her his empathy could sometimes overwhelm him. It could provoke a physical reaction from him, make him sick. He had wandered the village and had experienced thousands of emotions, and he found that if he didn't pay attention he could easily get overwhelmed. Kurama helped a lot. He was always there to speak up when it got to be too much for him. Kurama would always apologize for making the empathy so strong, and he would always thank the bijou in turn for the amazing gift. Naruto saw Kurama as his best friend, and he felt so sorry for him. Whenever they talked, they could sense each other's emotions. Kurama, his best friend, just wanted to be free. It was something that Naruto couldn't grant him without killing himself. He had pondered it once, but the reaction from Kurama had been severe. "I have put a lot of time into you, kid. Don't make me have wasted my time. You'll just piss me off." Naruto sensed the truth. Kurama was scared of losing Naruto, and was really angry at him for even thinking of killing himself. That meant Kurama cared for him. It was like how whenever Kakashi got really sad and guilty when he saw Naruto, it meant that he loved him. Naruto couldn't sense love or friendship like he could hatred, anger, grief, or guilt. He had to learn them whenever he experienced them for himself, and it was hard to understand them sometimes. It was easier to just think of love as an absence of hate. People were filled with bad emotions, and whenever someone felt a positive emotion, it was like a hole that Naruto couldn't see. He could sense the edges of these holes. He knew they were there, he was just blind to them. He didn't blame his empathy, though. He didn't need to know when people were happy or loved him. That wouldn't protect him like knowing when they were lying would. Though, Kurama had a long talk with him years ago when he assumed that love was just the absence of hate. Naruto still didn't understand what love actually was, but he got all warm in his chest when he was with any of his precious people. "Shouldn't you be focusing on your mission instead of getting lost in your memories? You're not even 6. You're too young to reminisce." Naruto quietly giggled as he looked around, more attentive to his duty. "I know you can sense Spore watching us on duty too, Kurama. Besides, I don't sense anyone with the intent of harm towards Gigi or to spy on him. I think we'll be fine." "You still shouldn't get complacent. They could be waiting outside your range with a long-range jutsu, Naruto-kun. You're sure taking the protection of Hokage Gigi very seriously, Kurama." Naruto could sense his friend's annoyance. "I know how much this means to you, kid. That's what I care about." Naruto assumed that it was love and affection that surged through him at Kurama's words and made him feel warm and safe. "I know." Kakashi hummed lightly as he looked over the reports of the current operations the Sandaime had ordered before his departure. Things had looked bad in the months after the Kyuubi attack, but things had more or less calmed down since that. For some reason, though, that only put the Sandaime more on edge. Kakashi was sure that the Anbu had not been issued as many espionage missions since the last Shinobi War. Team Ro was the spearhead of many of these operations, but with the inclusion of Agent Konoha into their ranks, they had started taking different missions. Usually only 2 Team Ro members were sent out, Weasel and Yamato being the current operatives that were deployed. Their latest report had just been delivered by a raven. Kakashi had been certain that they would have been the pair to go investigate Kumo, but they had instead been tasked with investigating IWA. Kakashi had a few guesses as to why, but was content without knowing for sure either way. Instead of worrying about the 2 Team Ro members, his thoughts were consumed with the reports he had received from Jiraiya. The Toad Hermit had been out of the village for years now, and had never even met Naruto. He always asked about the boy, but Sarutobi always gave vague details and implied that if Jiraiya wanted to know more, he should return. The hermit would always reply with just more questions, and it really frustrated the Hokage at times. Kakashi understood the Sanin's position. It was the same mindset that he was stuck in after Minato's death. He knew now what a mistake it was, but he was not in a position to try and tell the spy master so himself. But if Team Ro happened to be on a mission and ran into him, that could work. Whether the old hermit wanted it or not, it would be good for Naruto to have another connection to the parents that had been taken from him. That was all in the future, though. For now, he had some other business to attend to, such as keeping a closer eye on the Uchiha police and finding someone to infiltrate Root. There had been an incident where it seemed that an Uchiha police member had framed a merchant for murder. Apparently, the Uchiha member had owed massive debts and tried to bury it alongside the man he owed them to. The Uchiha police had disavowed his actions and arrested him when it came to light, but were tight-lipped on the details of the case and refused to issue an apology on behalf of the force. If it was allowed to get out of hand, well, the Uchiha weren't known for being cool-headed. As for the Root matter, it seemed the Hokage did not take kindly to his Anbu commander being the target of an assassination attempt from within the village. Honestly, Kakashi wasn't too happy about it either. But as he flipped open the latest Ika that had been included in Jiraiya's latest report, he found that he could deal with it for now. Yes, this latest book made everything worth it. Naruto sat still beside his Hokage as the negotiations entered their 4th day. The Reikage had been stubborn on every front. It seemed as if each day was to cover only one aspect of the treaty. He hadn't taken his mask off except in the sanctity of the Hokage's private suite. There was something interesting today in the form of the Reikage's new bodyguard. He was a young man who carried an interesting amount of swords, and Naruto could sense emotions within him that had greatly resembled ones Naruto himself had often felt, and he sensed emotions from something else, something far within the man. A bijou. The Reikage had brought a Jinchuriki. The Jinchuriki of the Eight Tails, or Gyuki, as Kurama had informed him. After the scene he had caused the first day, he had been ordered to be discreet. Dari seemed to be more perceptive than A, and Hiruzen dreaded the connection between Minato Namikaze and his son from being made. Naruto waited until a break was called before he quietly walked over to the much larger man. As he approached the Jinchuriki, the older man paused in his writing of his notepad. He seemed to be mumbling some kind of rhyme to himself. Kurama and Naruto had had many discussions in the past about the other Jinchuriki and the bijou. Kurama's siblings. Naruto had promised that he'd try to find some way to save them. He ignored the guilt Kurama harbored for creating the situation where Naruto would take upon such a monumental task. The bijou were scattered all over the world, and as a shinobi he didn't know when or if he'd ever meet them. They were usually well hidden by their respective villages. So it was important that he take advantage of this opportunity. He walked up to Killer Bee, for that was the name he had perceived through A's emotions, and held up a fist to him. Shinobi of both sides watched as Bee hesitated before he outstretched a fist and lightly pressed it to the offered hand of Agent Konoha. Naruto's eyes opened and he marveled at the sight of the Eight Tails before him. The bijou were massive and awe-inspiring. He would have been frightened had he not been so close to Kurama from the age of 2. That wasn't to say he wasn't respectful. He bowed slightly to Gyuki and Killer Bee as Kurama chuckled from behind him. "It's nice to meet you, Killer Bee-san, Gyuki-san." The giant ox-octopus scoffed and ignored him to look at Kurama. "You tell a human my name, Kurama? Without my permission? Your arrogance has not been tempered by time, I see." "Save your breath, Gyuki. I can't lie to Naruto-kun. We are too closely linked, and I have given him a gift." Naruto silently absorbed the waves of regret, anger, and grief that simmered deep within Gyuki. He was different than Kurama. Kurama was passion. When he was angry he burned hot, and overwhelmingly so. Gyuki was more restrained. He was a cold anger, analytical and patient. Naruto watched as Gyuki lowered his face down to him. Most would consider it rude to read another's mind, human. Naruto bowed once more. "I apologize, Gyuki-san, but I wasn't reading your mind." "So you aren't a Yamanaka? Glad I don't got to sock ya. You're the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. Best be proud to meet me, Killer Bee-ow." Naruto laughed as the pair of Gyuki and Killer Bee began bickering between themselves. He could sense both of their annoyance with the other, but it was a feeling born of friendship and connection. They really liked each other, much like Naruto and Kurama. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Bee-san. My name is Naruto. I know that we aren't true allies yet, but we're brothers, aren't we? We Jinchuriki, we have to stick together. I think I want to save the bijou, Bee-san. I want them to be free and safe from shinobi." Bee and Gyuki blinked in shock at the bluntness of the young boy, and Kurama sighed. Naruto didn't falter, though he had to prove that he would back up his words. He knew the risks he was taking. His Hokage wouldn't understand and it could potentially put him in danger, but he had to take advantage of this opportunity. As Killer Bee grinned widely, Naruto didn't even have to use his empathy to understand that he had found a kindred spirit. "How old are you, you bold son?" Over this time Bee was able to dodge the tentacle that aimed to slap into his head. "He is a child, Bee. Watch your language." As the two continued, Naruto's grin only grew, though it did take on a bittersweet edge. "It's okay, Bee-san, I know that you can't do much to help me. I can't do much right now, either. Just if you see Yujito-san or any other Jinchuriki, could you try to reach out to them? I'll do the same." The much larger man bent down and ruffled Naruto's hair. It was very affectionate, and Naruto found that he liked the attention. He liked Bee's feelings, they were comforting. Soft. His negative emotions were blunted. He was a good person. "Sure thing, Naruto. I'll keep the secret, yo." Naruto smiled as the mindscape faded away. He blinked up at Bee the second after their fists bumped, stoic behind the face mask. The Kumo ninja watched on in confusion at the interaction. Naruto grinned at what had transpired, and at the emotions he sensed from those watching him. No one had a clue as to what had transpired. That was fine, it probably would never pan out to much. But he had to try to bring the Jinchuriki together. It made him feel good that he could finally put a face to a name of one of his 8 siblings through fate. If there was anything that Naruto learned to treasure, it was a positive emotion. Naruto smiled as he walked back into the village proper. The land of iron had been cold. He wasn't used to that weather, being more accustomed to the warmth of Konohagakure. Still, it was a great experience, and he loved watching the Hokage in action. The Reikage had been a terrifying man, but had been handled quite easily by the old man. Being able to use his gifts to serve his village had been everything he'd ever wanted as well. The Sandaime had been quite pleased with his efforts, though he did also point out what Naruto needed to work on. Cat and Boar had been quite pleased with his service as well, even going so far as to say that Weasel-senpai would be proud. He was glad that he was able to exceed his superiors' expectations. Not sensing any disappointment or regret from them was a blessing. He followed the Sandaime back to the Hokage Tower. Boar and Cat had disappeared off towards the Anbu HQ to debrief under Kakashi. Naruto had managed to discern quite a bit of information throughout the negotiations, and they'd be adding it to their files for future reference. Naruto would have normally gone with them if he had been a normal Anbu agent. He had a different job assigned to them, which is why he was leisurely walking through the busiest district of the village alongside his leader. It was the easiest way to utilize his power to check in on the populace in order to ascertain any new developments that may have happened while the Hokage was away. It likely wouldn't pick up any hidden shinobi news, but it was wise to throw out a net and see what Naruto could catch. Most of the villagers were fine and content, though he was bombarded with more individual problems. Spurned lovers, angry family members, greedy business people, and upset children were the loudest signals that he received. There were lots of gaps and holes of what he could sense, so for the most part the villagers were happy. As he passed more people though, an undercurrent of fear started to become more and more apparent within all the civilians. Some scandal had happened, and recently too. As a patrol of the Uchiha police passed, the feelings heightened, and Naruto sensed from the Uchiha feelings of indignation, injured pride, and injustice. He could see them sneering at those they had sworn to serve, and the fires of distrust were slowly lighting within the hearts of the villagers. This wasn't good. He and the Hokage slowly made their way into the Hokage Tower, and from the outside Naruto seemed fine. On the inside, worry gripped his heart, and Kurama was silent as he tried to cope with the fact that something was very wrong with the Uchiha police force. He needed to speak with Itachi. Itachi watched as the Kumo envoy approached the village of Iwagakure. He and Yamato had gone deep within IWA and had only ran into an IWA patrol once. Luckily, their disguises had seen them through the inspection and had held underneath the enemy's scrutiny. Their orders had been to intercept the Kumo delegation's information and make a copy of it. If Kumo and IWA started talking behind the scenes, the Hokage wanted to know what was being laid on the table. He couldn't just trust Kumo to work with them, and he was doing everything he could to force the alliance to stick. Itachi appreciated the strategy. It was very political, and of the two, it would only work against Inoki was too wily to try and outsmart. The fence-sitter had faced down Madara Uchiha. He would not be cowed by political maneuvering. Itachi found the political arena a much better alternative than the battlefield. He had experienced combat during the Third Shinobi War. The thought of his brother or Naruto facing those hardships made his heart grow cold. They were the reason that he fought, for the next generation. He had paid for the mistakes of those who had come before. He would make sure that those he came after were spared from any mistake of his. He had just made it to Anbu when his father had spoken of how he should try and become the Hokage, how it was time an Uchiha wore the hat and took up the mantle of village leader. Tensions with his clan and the rest of the village had been high after the Kyuubi attack, and his father's arrogance and pride was not helping matters. Things were getting a little out of control at home, and he had used his apprenticeship with Naruto to escape from it all. Things were heating up recently with a few scandals with the Uchiha police force though, and Itachi was starting to get worried about his clan overreacting. Tensions weren't too high yet, though it would only be a matter of time before things escalated. Hopefully, the issues could be resolved peacefully. With Naruto's help, he was sure that things wouldn't get too out of hand. The boy's gift would be incredibly useful to maintain peace and security. The last thing that Itachi wanted was for his clan to become a danger to his village. The will of fire burned deep within him, and he would not see it extinguished by his clan's or father's pride. Wrapped up in his thoughts, he almost missed Yamato appear beside him. Weasel Taishu, there is an IWA patrol headed our way. We should leave. Itachi nodded and leapt off into the cliff face behind them. It was time to return home. Sarutobi smoked his pipe as Konoha stood behind him. Koharu, Hamura, and Danzo stood before him. They were meeting about the summit, and also trading barbs about the direction of the village's latest policies. It was an old, familiar game between himself and Danzo, and it brought a sense of normalcy to his day. Naruto had seemed very anxious, and that was a large red flag. The boy's ability made him an emotional barometer, and apparently something was brewing within the village itself. As the meeting went on, Konoha kept staring at Danzo. Eventually, Danzo caught on or made his attention noticeable and stared back. Sarutobi dismissed his advisors and was surprised when the young Uzumaki walked up to Danzo. Advisor Shimura-san. May I speak with you? The leader of Root paused for a second, glancing towards the Hokage before nodding. Naruto turned and bowed to him before walking with his old friend and rival. It did not bode well. He wasn't pleased. 7-year-old Naruto Uzumaki sat in his own apartment practicing his sealing. He had moved out of the Sarutobi compound a year ago after the resentment from the civilian sector had started to increase. Tension had been building throughout Konoha for years, and with the escalation of the distrust between the village and the Uchiha, a select few had become very vocal about their dislike for the demon brat. Not that anyone uttered that in public, that is. But when Naruto had noticed that his adopted family had been suffering for their loyalty to him, he had moved out on his own initiative. Hiruzen had tried to talk him out of it, and even Asuma had tried to convince him to stay. Young Konohamaru had been bawling on the day Naruto had moved out, but had managed to calm down when Naruto promised to visit and bring him over to his apartment to visit on a regular basis. It was unspoken throughout the village, but widely known, that the Sarutobi clan was fiercely protective of the Jinchuriki, and he of them. Even those who looked down on Naruto wouldn't speak poorly of the Sarutobi to his face. The villagers had learned that lesson a long time ago. He was an anomaly to the village. It had been years ago that the rumors of his strange behavior had circulated, and Naruto had learned how to act more socially acceptable now. Naruto was seen quite frequently during the day throughout the village. Going on walks, buying groceries, the like. Little did anyone know the true intent of his public ventures. Being shunned was the perfect cover for a spy who scanned the emotions of everyone he ran into. Naruto had retrieved invaluable data for the Hokage and the village's benefit. The entire village was under scrutiny and none of them knew it. Well, that wasn't entirely true. He had to be careful not to scan any Yamanaka too deeply. Inoichi had stormed into the Hokage's office a few months back, warning him that a shinobi had infiltrated the village and was looking into people's minds. It was embarrassing to have been caught for him and the Hokage both in a shinobi village. Nothing built distrust more than getting caught spying on your own subjects. Luckily for them, Inoichi had been brought up to speed and a story of a new counter-espionage training had been fabricated. It was good, but every so often a Yamanaka would try to pin down his location and he'd have to evade them for a handful of hours. The last one had been quite persistent and had nearly chased him down for a whole day. Apparently, the training was doing wonders for the Yamanaka's abilities, but it was annoying for Naruto all the same. While Naruto walked around during the day, Agent Konoha would appear in the nights. Thanks to the tensions between the Uchiha and the Hokage, he and Weasel had been tasked as the mediators between the two parties. Itachi would spy for the council, and Naruto would accompany him to the Uchiha compound and read what he could from the emotions of the meetings. Things had progressively gotten worse and worse. The Uchiha were entertaining thoughts of rebellion. Of all the plans they could have come to, they had to decide upon the most suicidal. Kurama was of the opinion that it was the only choice and Uchiha would make the worst one. His opinions on Uchiha had not changed much over the years, though he had grown to accept Itachi in Naruto's life. Naruto's training had been intensified as well. At 7 years old, he deserved his status as an Anbu agent. That being said, he was still a long ways from the level of Kakashi or Itachi. He had been raised on the models put in place during the Second and Third Great Shinobi Wars. Kakashi and Itachi had even put him under mock missions resembling ones that they had undergone in their own tours of duty. Naruto rarely disappointed. His performance in the Kanabi Bridge exercise had made Kakashi's guilt and grief shrink down until it was almost unnoticeable for weeks afterward. Kurama said that meant Kakashi had been proud. It was the Hokage who had given Naruto his latest mission sealing. Apparently, they had reached a stopping point in his training, at least for a while. The Hokage was adamant that Naruto would not be pushed too hard, that his progress was outstanding, but he desired his young ward to take some time to reflect and hone his techniques. Naruto understood the reasonings. His body had just started growing, and it would change his taijutsu. As his body grew, his chakra would as well, and only constant control exercises would maintain the levels of control he had grown accustomed to. Therefore, the Hokage had taken this time to be used to further his learnings in new areas and avenues. Sealing was the first of his new subjects, and also the hardest. Naruto greatly enjoyed it. It was soothing and felt natural. He knew that his parents had been sealing prodigies, and practicing the art made him feel closer to them. That alone was enough for him to obsess over the art after only a week of instruction. He had also spent more time at the Hokage's side, as Agent Konoha, learning from observing everything. Mission assignments, council meetings, advisor meetings, the paperwork that ran the village, and he had even taken to transcribing the Hokage's private correspondences. The young shinobi did his best to do his leader and grandfather figure proud. It made his own pride feel warm and strong. It was quite an addictive emotion. Naruto-kun. Naruto looked up to see Itachi sitting in his windowsill, tense and harried. Emotional. He did not often see his mentor like this, and he immediately rose to his feet. Itachi-sensei, what? Get ready. We have to leave. Now. Get your mask. Naruto's body went into autopilot as it had been trained to. As he grabbed the stack of exploding notes he had just finished creating and grabbed the mask that was on his hip. It was cold professionalism that washed over him as he wordlessly followed his superior's lead, out the window and across the village. They headed out away from the village, past the wall, and towards the river to the east. He didn't know if this was another mock mission or an actual mission, but either way it didn't matter. He would do what he'd have to. They ran for half an hour before Itachi suddenly stopped. Naruto stopped beside him, and silently awaited for the words of his mentor. The early morning sun was just starting to breach through the upper branches of the trees, but he felt no comfort from the light. Something was terribly wrong. My friend, Shisui, is in trouble. I believe that root is after him. I'm sorry to ask for your assistance, but I can't trust anyone else if there's fighting. I don't want you to get involved, but take Shisui and leave. Understood? Naruto bit down on his instinctual refusal, buried his demand to fight alongside his teacher, his brother, and nodded. If he wanted to help at all, he had to follow the rules. He had promised that he never lied to Itachi again. He would stick to that promise. Itachi turned away and took off again. As they neared a clearing, Itachi signaled Naruto to peel off to the side and he obeyed. It was evident that a fight had recently been fought here. The environment clearly showed signs of an intense jutsu trade-off. Scorch marks and cuts in trees that resembled marks from wind nature chakra. Shisui and Danzo himself. That was hardly a good sign. There were other markers of additional combatants, but that made sense. Danzo never traveled alone. He slowly made his way alongside the bottom of the gorge, nearest the river. He could sense Itachi above, talking to someone else. It could only be Shisui. He could not hear them, but his empathy was enough for him to understand the gist of what was going on. Danzo had believed Shisui using his Sharingan to stop the coup was a waste. Danzo had stolen something of great worth, one of Shisui's eyes? Naruto couldn't believe that a dojutsu could be that coveted, before he remembered the stories of Madara. Alongside the rumors that a Sharingan could control the bijou, a rumor which Kurama had grudgingly verified. The Kyuubi attack was indeed orchestrated by an Uchiha, but not one that was in the village. Shisui continued, and Naruto felt his heart drop for Itachi. The coup would not be stopped. Root was involved. Conflict was imminent now. He felt Itachi's bottomless sorrow grow as Shisui turned from him and urged him to kill him. Naruto wasn't fast enough, couldn't move or do anything, before the part of Itachi that Naruto always admired, the part that was selfless and served the village before everything and anything, urged him forwards until Shisui was unconscious and falling into the gorge. Naruto leapt off the wall and caught the body before it could land upon the rocks below. He quickly brought the body up to Itachi. As he came within sight of his brother, his older brother who had always protected him, he saw sorrow in his eyes. Sorrow that he had only ever sensed deep within the Uchiha. And as his eyes slowly changed from the foreign shape they had been in, he watched as Itachi cried for the first time he had ever known him. The Uchiha quickly turned away from Naruto and stood tall. Take care of the body, Konoha-kun. He deserves to be found by his family. I will inform the Hokage. He was gone before Naruto could say anything, before he could try to comfort him. Before he could tell him of the spark of life that was still within Shisui Uchiha's chest. He felt conflicted. Would it be a lie to save Shisui? Did he have the right to risk everything to save this man? Was it selfish if he only debated it because of what it would mean to Itachi? No, above everything else, Shisui Uchiha was a shinobi of the leaf. Besides, he had been ordered to take care of the body. He would do everything in his power to do so. Kurama dashed before he could even finish his question. A slow trickle of the Kyuubi's chakra flooded out of his hands and into the body of the dying man, crude and inefficient without Naruto guiding it, but he had yet to learn medical ninjutsu. He alone couldn't save Shisui's life. But he knew someone that could. Kabuto was hard at work filing paperwork over all of the patients he had seen that morning when a faint smell wafted from down the hallway. One of the first things he had gained when working underneath Orochimaru was exercises and rituals that could enhance the senses a person relied upon. Miso ramen. He had grown quite familiar with the food as of late. It was apparently for him, as a brown-haired girl rapped a knuckle on the open door of his office and greeted him. Hello, Kabuto-san? I have your order of miso ramen. He smiled and thanked her as if he had ordered it himself, and paid her for the meal. As she walked away, he quickly grabbed the styrofoam bowl and left his work as it was. He had been summoned. His new leader finally had a use of him. Kabuto had supplied weekly reports to the young shinobi, but he had wondered when he would first be called upon to serve beyond information. In truth, he had not believed that he would be called upon so soon. He made his way to a nearby park that had a play structure, with dozens of small children screaming and playing around it. Children were some of the best camouflage. Their innocence tended to bleed into the surroundings they frequented. Nobody noticed as he walked past the statue and didn't appear from the other side of it. Secret entrances didn't always have to be flashy after all. The walk down the hallway wasn't very long. It had used to be covered in dust, but after Naruto had shown an interest in using the hideout, they had refurbished it. Orochimaru had dozens of bases scattered around Konoha before he fled, and the masses only knew of a select few. The Anbu knew of the majority of them. Kabuto had known of all of them. Naruto had been excited to learn of the 3 bases that had yet to be found, even by the Hokage. They were quite small, but privacy is something that could never be priced high enough. Especially within a shinobi village. When he walked in, he expected to see his master. He had not anticipated a body, stripped and bleeding out on one of the tables, surgical tools prepped and readied. Naruto-sama. You didn't have to get me a gift. He enjoyed the annoyance his jokes seemed to inspire in the young shinobi. Kabuto-kun. This is Uchiha Shisui. I need you to save him. Please. Kabuto made his way to the fallen Uchiha and looked him over. There were questions on his tongue, but the body would answer some of them. He saw lacerations common with finely channeled wind chakra. Internal bleeding. Bruising that was common with broken ribs. 2 missing eyes. I must confess, Naruto-sama, that there isn't much of a body left. It's important that I know. Do you want me to merely preserve his life to gain information? Or save it entirely? The way that the boy's eyes darkened with anger sent a shiver down his spine. He knew before the boy even opened his mouth. The realization of such caused Naruto pause and then sigh. Why do you tease me? It isn't nice. Shisui is a true shinobi of the leaf. I won't let him die. The boy had found quite the opportunity, it seemed. Kabuto had been informed already of the situation with the Uchiha. Shisui had been tasked with spying on Itachi, but had defected to the village the same as the prodigy of the Uchiha. Even if his life was saved right now, his life in the light of Konoha was over. The Uchiha would never accept him and Danzo wouldn't let him live. Even the Hokage would be hard-pressed to trust him. He had gotten in too deep. Kabuto washed his hands and began his work. I'll take it from here, Naruto-sama. I'll notify you when the operation is complete. The boy nodded to him and hugged him from behind. Thank you, Kabuto-kun. Thank you? Kabuto watched the young Uzumaki leave and in that moment found his loyalty had been cemented. Whatever doubts he had about serving the boy were gone, ashes, and in their place unmovable loyalty. The will of fire, reignited and blazing as strong as the sun. In that moment he wished that the boy could have felt the emotion he had inspired within him. As the moment passed, he went about saving an Uchiha's life. Shisui Uchiha didn't know it yet, but he owed his life to the young Naruto Uzumaki. It was a fact. If the boy had not been there, the Uchiha's body would have washed up farther down the river, long dead. Kabuto would make sure he would see that debt paid. He alone wouldn't be enough to serve the boy, they would need more soldiers. For whatever cause Naruto pursued. Kakashi waited silently as the Anbu squad leaders gave their reports. The tension that had been brewing in the village after the Kyuubi incident had never been worse. Fights were breaking out between civilians and the Uchiha police force, and there had been casualties on both sides. The other clans saw the signs and had ostracized the Uchiha, and had fanned the flames of the tensions even more. More Hyuga were being requested for jobs from long-standing Uchiha-favored customers. The Uchiha had not been invited to the daimyo's palace for a wedding of the daimyo's cousin, and the civilian council had approved trade practices that undercut Uchiha business. The entirety of the village was turning against them. The Uchiha were not the only threat to the village at the time. Kakashi knew that periods of civil unrest were the perfect time for sabotage and espionage. Anbu had been working tirelessly to mitigate any outside influence in their current state of crisis. Kyumogakure had increased correspondence with the Wagakure since the treaty, and reports had claimed that Kirigakure was slowly degrading into a civil war due to bloodline purging instilled by the Yondaime Mizukage. Relations with Sunigakure had slowed and grown colder, as the daimyo of Wind had suddenly started sending more jobs to Konoha. The 5 great nations were slowly reaching a very dangerous point. If the situation in Konoha did not stabilize soon, then he wouldn't be surprised if a 4th great shinobi war were to begin. He'd do his best to minimize that chance. The Uchiha needed to be settled. Unfortunately, the Hokage was slowly losing hope for a peaceful resolution. Rumors were spreading that Shisui Uchiha had disappeared. Apparently, the Uchiha elders had tasked him with overseeing Itachi, and now believed the prodigy to be a spy. While they weren't wrong, it ruined any chance the Hokage had to use Itachi peacefully. Agent Konoha had been quite useful in discovering that intelligence. He was also very helpful in identifying the force that had supplied further evidence of Shisui's demise to the Uchiha elders' route. Danzo had become more active, more than he had been in nearly a decade. Uchiha. Danzo. Kyumogakure. Iwagakure, Kirigakure, Sunagakure. The village had to be aware of all possible threats, even ones that had grown quiet, such as Orochimaru. Agent Konoha had somehow discovered a few of the Snake Sanin spies, and while the Hokage had attributed it to his empathy, Kakashi suspected that there was more to it than that. He had no problem with allowing his younger brother his secrets, though. He had more than earned the right to keep them. Naruto had exceeded all of their expectations, and yet worried him all the same. Naruto was the future of Konoha itself, a very promising candidate for the title of Hokage. His skill as a shinobi was being harnessed beautifully. It was his social skills that Kakashi worried about. He had noticed in conversations that Naruto was slowly starting to focus more on the negative aspects of people he did not know. Kakashi blamed the empathy it made it hard for the boy to see the good in people. In all people. He couldn't be blamed for it, though. How could you believe in something when all that you saw was the opposite? While concerns of the village plagued his mind, so too did concerns for the young Uzumaki. What would happen if Naruto were to ever lose faith in the people of the village? If he decided that the people of Konoha were too twisted and cruel, that they didn't deserve his protection? It may be a stretch, but it was important to identify worst-case scenarios in his line of work. If he was being honest with himself, the worst-case scenario for Konoha would see him at Naruto's side against them. For if the boy ever truly decided that he was better off without the village, then how could Kakashi deny his logic? How could he abandon him? Those who broke the rules were trash. Those who abandoned their friends were worse than trash. But Naruto was family. Kakashi had turned his back on his family once, on his father. He didn't have it in him to make that mistake again. Hopefully, he would be able to avert that possibility and find some way to nurture Naruto's humanity. Of course, that would have to be after Kakashi took care of the power-hungry ninja villages that would see their village burn. He would see them all beaten and bloody. He was no Inuzuka, but he was a Hatake. The Hatake of old were known for their determination to protect their clan, their family. Kakashi would remind all of the elemental nations just who, exactly, the Hatake were if he had to. Naruto was down in the safe house watching Kabuto take care of the sleeping Shisui. The Uchiha was peaceful, thanks to the sedative. If not for that, then he would have awakened by now. Naruto had asked for Kabuto to keep him under just a bit longer, so as to plan out what to actually do with him. He had just returned with some food for the both of them, and had started eating as he thought. Kabuto-kun, how long will rehabilitation take him? The medic shrugged, and cleaned his glasses. Hard to say, Naruto-sama. His injuries were quite extensive, and the loss of his eyes will delay any progress to combat for quite a substantial amount of time. The psychological damage, well, I don't know how bad it will be. Naruto nodded as he ate his sandwich. What should I do with him? The gray-haired spy turned and looked at him. That's a loaded question. What do you want? What are you working towards? I want to be the Hokage. Naruto pouted as Kabuto laughed. What? I do. Believe it. That's not enough for you. It's also just a part of what you want. I can tell you want more than a hat and a figurehead position. Naruto blinked. The response had been so honest. It made him think about what he wanted, and he thought back to his meeting with B, and what he said about the Jinchuriki. I want to save the bijou. Naruto, you don't have to dash. Ignoring Kurama, Naruto's eyes steeled and he nodded to Kabuto. I want to save the bijou. Naruto couldn't help but be impressed at the grin that came over Kabuto's face. The man wasn't afraid at all, and Naruto knew the weight of what he just declared. Now that's a worthy goal. You will need influence outside of Konoha in order to achieve that. You will need agents and allies, both within and outside the village. If discovered, you will be labeled a traitor. Until I become Hokage. He had thought long and hard about it. The shinobi system as a whole was responsible for the treatment of the bijou, and it would have to be torn out root and stem. It was a disgusting balance of financial and martial domination, and it only bred hatred and bloodshed. If not for those close to him, he would have believed that every human was implicit in its continuation. The evil within every man, woman, and even child could cloud his senses at times. His education made him believe that such a shift would take monumental action, a great catalyst. Moving slowly would allow for more pacifistic approaches, but he only had a single lifetime to do what 3 great shinobi wars couldn't accomplish: peace. He would be the one that lead the world into its next great step towards true peace. United under one banner, one people. A paradise for all sentient beings, where bijou and human could live side by side. Becoming a Kage was the first logical step. Well, you'll still have to answer to the daimyo. No. I know where you're trying to lead me, and I understand. That's something that we can talk about in the future. Naruto smiled and held out a sandwich to Kabuto. For now, let's just eat. And then we can go back to deciding upon the fate of the blind Uchiha. It's the only good kind of Uchiha, kid. A blind one. Naruto gave a mental snort as he shook his head. You're forgetting Itachi, Kurama. Itachi sighed as Naruto once again failed to strike him with his kunai. You should be doing better than this, Naruto-kun. Your training may have been put on hold, but you are clearly not giving this fight your full attention. Naruto gasped for breath as he sat down where he had stood. I'm sorry, Itachi-senpai. He closed his eyes and laid back on the ground. A cool breeze blew through the trees, rustling the leaves. For a while, that was the only sound. Then, Itachi sat down beside him. Naruto-kun. I believe you have something you want to talk about. It's been troubling you all day. I don't want to lose you. Itachi looked at his young protege, and smiled softly. You know that I can't promise you will never lose me with Shinobi, Naruto-kun. I know that, but with the Uchiha just before he could say any more, Itachi decided to stop him by running his hand through the boy's hair. You're younger than I was, when I first joined the Anbu. You remind me of myself in many ways. But I don't think I can ever come close to how noble and honorable you are. I want you to promise me that you'll leave the Uchiha clan to me. I know what a promise means to you. I need you to do this for me. He wasn't surprised when the boy grew silent and refused to make eye contact. His own smile widened in reply. We can't promise things that we know we can't do. I know that you have your mind set on helping, but Agent Konoha cannot assist me when the time comes. Itachi saw the boy's eyes widen in fear as he finally sensed the guilt that Itachi had hidden deep within himself. And no, you don't mean to, you can't. I do. I will kill the Uchiha clan. And when I do, Agent Konoha must do his best to finish me. Naruto immediately sat up and slammed his fist into Itachi's chest. No. You can't. I won't let you, I'll stop you. It has to be done, Naruto-kun. It's okay, I've taught you everything I can. It's up to you now, to grow strong on your own initiative. No, 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 no. You can't just leave me. Itachi had seen Naruto cry many times, but he believed this was the first time he had caused a boy to weep. The Uzumaki latched onto him and embraced him tightly. I'll be lost without you. He pulled the boy closer and rested his chin upon his head. I know it's scary, but you won't be alone. You're strong now. You have everything you need to be a great shinobi. I believe in you, and I need you to trust in me. I must do this to save my brother. Can you look after him for me, when I'm gone? Can you watch Sasuke? The blonde-haired boy looked up at him with tears streaming down his face and slowly nodded. You have to promise to see come back someday. You have to promise to try. The boy's fingers began to tear into his clothing in desperation, and though he knew he shouldn't, he felt the words leave his mouth before he could stop them. I promise, Naruto. I promise that I'll try. You did what? Hiruzen quietly growled out at his advisors as they sat across from him. Hamura and Koharu couldn't help the tension they experienced from his outburst, but Danzo seemed nonplussed. I ordered the go-ahead for the operation. Itachi will do his duty as a leaf nin and eradicate the Uchiha within a single night. Quick and painless, and no risk for collateral damage. No civilian losses. We will lose the reputation of the Uchiha clan, but it's imperative that we prune the bush. That wasn't your call, Danzo. I am the Hokage, and I have let the situation get out of hand. Danzo glared back with equal anger. Your drive and strength has rekindled these past few years, but your heart is still too soft. They have chosen their path and Uchiha are stubborn. Foolish. Would you see our enemies tear us apart because you couldn't bear to make the hard call? Finding peace is the hard call, Danzo. You're taking the easy way out. The destruction of an entire clan is unprecedented. I will not be the Hokage who ordered the deaths of a founding clan. Danzo leaned back. You will not be remembered as such either. Anyone else would have been confused by Danzo's words, but Hiruzen knew his old friend well enough to immediately understand what he meant. How dare you? Even he could not stop his muscles from tensing at the killing intent they leveled at each other. He swiped a hand forward and an Anbu guard left the room to dissuade the shinobi in the vicinity from believing that the Hokage was under attack. He took a moment to take a breath and sat back down with sorrowful eyes. This was the ugly side of running a village. He had done his best to lead honorably and justly, to strive for peace and transparency. He had kept Danzo around, even ignored his actions in the shadows at times if only out of respect for the bond the two of them had. Was that a mistake? Was this just another instance in which his inaction would haunt him? Taunt him for his mistakes? You condemn a boy who loves his family, to not only kill his entire clan but to then take up the mantle of a rogue terrorist. Disavow his actions? Label him a traitor? I ask a shinobi to do his duty for the village he loves above all else. Hiruzen could see no sign of regret in his old friend's eyes. He saw a strained calm. A nervousness. Hiruzen was then acutely aware that Naruto was not at his side. He had grown accustomed to the boy's insights during these meetings, and now, he was just realizing that maybe his behavior had been noticed. It wasn't necessary that the boy attend every meeting, but this was the first time in a long time that he wasn't there for a meeting with Danzo. A quick glance showed that Hamura and Koharu were also nervous. Not of a fight, but of discovery. Hiruzen felt his heart stop and he turned to the windows in a panic, looking desperately over his village as the sun slowly set. It was so peaceful. So calm. Yes, Sarutobi. It is to be done tonight. Sasuke stopped in front of the gates to the Uchiha compound in confusion. Something was wrong. The gates were left slightly open, and the compound was quiet. The Uchiha weren't the most exuberant of people, and even Sasuke knew that recently things had been odd within his clan. But this wasn't right. Something was wrong. He walked into the compound and gagged as the smell of blood filled his nose. His eyes watered as he saw bodies laying in the street. Everything blurred together as he stumbled to the closest body and turned it over to reveal one of his neighbors. The elderly man's neck had been cut down to the bone, and he recoiled as one of the neck tendons flopped out of the dead man's neck and onto his hand. Sasuke fell back and tried to catch his breath before he paused. He looked down the street towards his house and saw the lights flickering inside. He ran. Sasuke made it into his house and heard sobbing. He slowly made his way up the stairs, the sounds from his parents' room making his skin grow cold, and his chest tighten. The air evaded his attempts at trying to catch his breath until he opened the door and saw his brother standing over his bleeding parents, his sword ready to execute their mother. Itachi looked over and locked his gaze with him. Sasuke could only stare in horror at his brother's twisted Sharingan that shed tears of blood. His brother was expressionless as his Sharingan, his wrong and evil Sharingan, twisted and spun, and suddenly he was in a world of negative light. Shadows were bright white, and what would be light was dark black. He could still see everything, and he could only sob as he watched his brother slaughter his entire clan. Hate me, Sasuke. That is the only way you could ever hope to kill me. Hate me. No! Nisan. Sasuke was cut off as Itachi stabbed his sword through his chest. Then you'll remain the helpless child that watched his parents die. Suddenly, the world was back in focus, and Sasuke watched as his surroundings slowly cleared, heard their mother shrieking for him to look away, watched as their father attempted to use a jutsu before being backhanded into the floor. Watched his brother move in for the kill. He watched as a strange Anbu, shorter than himself, burst through the window and swiped at his brother. Itachi languidly stepped back and readied his blade. Ah, so the Hokage caught on to my plan. Of course he would send you, Konoha. You're the only one who would have a chance to stop me. Itachi Uchiha, you are charged with treason, murder, and crimes against the founding clan of Konoha. Surrender. Sasuke yearned for his brother to drop his sword. For him to stop this. To turn back into the brother that he loved, that taught him how to use his shuriken and kunai, that was proud of him when his father was disappointed. To turn back into his hero and not this monster. His brother cried more tears of blood as he dashed forwards to the lone Anbu who tried to stop him. He wanted this madness to end. He wanted his brother back. Naruto felt nothing as he countered Itachi's blade with his kunai. He didn't allow himself to feel the emotions that were straining against his training and willpower. His anger at being forced to fight the man he saw and loved as an older brother was channeled into his strikes, and in truth it was not Itachi he was fighting, but the world. His love for the Uchiha held his heart in a vice grip and clenched painfully, even as he coldly leveled his own killing intent at him. His loneliness cried out deafeningly as he continually sensed the deep depression that Itachi was sinking deeper and deeper into. Each strike sent painful shocks into his arms as their blades connected, and it was the only thing Naruto could do to strike faster, and faster, the pain being the only thing grounding him in the moment. This was the greatest test the universe could have contrived to set against him. There was no scenario in which Naruto didn't lose something of incredible worth. He was extremely lucky that he had the maturity of mind to channel any hopelessness or desperation into the fight. He buried his heart and became the weapon he was trained to be. He flipped through the air, grabbing Sasuke by the collar and dragging him out of the range of a fireball. It hit the ground and Sasuke cried out as the heat exploded out and burnt them both. Naruto didn't flinch through the pain as he was too busy deflecting the knives his mentor was sending towards Sasuke with terrifying accuracy. Kurama! Naruto mentally shouted to his closest ally. The fox was quick in flooding Naruto's body with a tail's worth of chakra, and Naruto moved forward even as he counted down in his head. Itachi dodged his flurry of strikes with liquid grace, before his red eyes flashed as their eyes caught sight of each other. The genjutsu he had been entrapped within was broken almost instantaneously by Kurama, though that instant where his chakra fluctuated was all that was needed for Itachi to move into a grapple and launch Naruto into the side of the building. Naruto coughed, and slowly pulled himself free as he watched Itachi move towards his bleeding mother. The clan head house was slowly catching fire and Sasuke stood trembling between his elder brother and his beaten and broken parents. Naruto grunted as he felt his limbs become flooded with Kurama's chakra once more. He had no hope of beating Itachi, all he could do was waste his time. He knew as he dashed forwards, that even with a single tail of Bijuu chakra, trying to stop Itachi was like trying to move a mountain with a single earth dragon jutsu. An endeavor in futility. Still, there was only him between the extinction of the Uchiha clan and Itachi. He barely managed to get in front of Sasuke and kick out, forcing Itachi to take a step back. He pushed forwards kicking and punching trying to hold onto his momentum with all he had. He was forced to rely upon his boosted healing faculties as Itachi inflicted wound after wound. He couldn't fight defensively, he could only minimize damage and leave as small of openings as possible. Itachi cut his arm yet again, and Naruto gritted his teeth. Itachi dashed forwards in an attempt to reverse the momentum, and Naruto skipped back before flinging a handful of seals in the air. Itachi only had a moment before the exploding notes and flash seals ignited. The force of the blast sent both of them back and did damage to the structural integrity of the building. Naruto flung kunai and shuriken as he had been taught as efficiently as he could at the most likely routes his opponent would attempt to take to get to him. He heard the clang of metal colliding to the left and turned to face his foe, before he felt the jerk of his chakra fluctuating to dispel genjutsu. He couldn't even think as his body jerked to the side to dodge the attack from his blind spot he felt in his bones was coming. He couldn't move fast enough to dodge the blast of fire that impacted where he had been standing less than a second ago, but he forced his burning and smoking body to move. He could feel his skin cracking and falling off from how forceful he turned around to engage Itachi, only to find that 3 different copies of his sensei were closing in on him. He roared and ran to meet them head-on, trading blows and dispelling one before he found himself knocked into the air and falling onto his back. His breath was knocked out of his lungs. Then he watched as 2 kunai speared through his hands and into the floorboards. He felt the blade slice right between his bones and his muscles spasm as the blade cleaved tendons and muscle alike. He screamed and his vision went white from the pain. He could feel his body trying to heal around the wounds and the burn from his cells unable to regenerate was worse than the initial pain itself. Tears ran down his face as even then he sensed the utter despair around him. Sasuke's fear of his own brother, the waking Mikoto's fear of seeing her eldest son kill her youngest child, and Itachi's utter despair at the pain he had inflicted unto Naruto, and what he was about to do in front of his brother. Sasuke shut his eyes and screamed as Itachi swung his sword at his helpless mother. At the last moment, Fugaku threw himself in front of his wife in a final act of love and sacrifice. The Uchiha patriarch whispered something to his eldest son, but Naruto couldn't hear it. All the negative feelings and the pain became too much for him. He roared once more and tore his hands forward, splitting them in half from the center of his palms and rushed towards Itachi. Blood was pouring from his hands and the force of his running was keeping the separate flesh apart, which was only lengthening the regeneration period. His healing was powerful, but even he had limits. Luckily, it seemed that the move had caught even Itachi off balance, and before he could move away, his dying father had grabbed hold of him and held tight. Naruto barreled into Itachi's side and launched him away from his family. The fire had grown out of control and the roof began to collapse. Naruto kept his senses alert as the smoke clouded his vision. He could hear Sasuke crying and shaking his father behind him as his mother struggled to pull him to safety. Beyond the smoke he saw shapes moving and he readied his stance. His hands had joined back together, but there was no skin, only bone and muscle moving into the clawed stance of the monkey fist. The shapes paused before they seemed to shift and disappear. He stayed still, and suddenly they returned. He leapt into action, jumping through the smoke and slashed at the closest figure, only to stop at the last second as he came mask to mask with Boar. Konoha, stand down. Naruto stepped back and silently checked the newcomer's identity. He nodded when he was satisfied that they weren't imposters and looked to the survivors of Itachi's family. They need help. You do too, kid. Your hands. Naruto leapt out of the building before he could hear the last of the order, and made his way to the nearby roof. His hands slowly regrew his skin, the nerves burning as if they had been submerged in acid. The pain swirled through him and clouded his vision, but he was too busy searching for Itachi. He couldn't sense him within his range. So Naruto channeled Kurama's chakra straight into his empathy. It was like opening his eyes for the first time. His range grew tenfold, and through all of the white noise of the village and the trauma of the Uchiha, he could sense Itachi making his way out of the village. Then he was gone. There was a few seconds of peace before Naruto realized that he had been crying. The tears had run down his mask and had cleared paths through the blood and the grime. He sensed Cat behind him, looking over him silently. He closed his eyes and willed himself to stop crying, but the tears wouldn't end. Konoha. His eyes opened at her voice and he stopped channeling the chakra to his empathy. As his range died down, he found that the tears stopped as well. That didn't mean his heart was any less broken. Come, Cat. I sensed intruders who intend to make off with some Sharingan. It seems there are some conspirators still within the village. Hiruzen, release us, this is pointless. Sarutobi did not move from the window. Minutes after he had realized the plot that had been hatched underneath his nose, reports had come in. The Uchiha clan had been nearly completely massacred. It was quite impressive, in a truly horrible way. It had been too clean. Not only was the clan compound hit, but so was the Uchiha Police Force HQ. Itachi was skilled, but he could not have done this alone. His Anbu were patrolling in full force. He was just waiting on Konoha to return. Koharu was about to voice another complaint when the four of them sensed the presence of an emotional shinobi approaching. The aura of killing intent radiated from down the stairs and it commanded silence from the four village elders. They had fought throughout the 3 shinobi wars, and this presence would have given them pause even in their prime. A young boy slowly opened the door, tears dripping down his Anbu mask. He silently moved past Koharu and Hamura, and set down a handful of bloodied and chipped masks on the table in front of Danzo. The two looked at each other in silence, and it was only then that the Hokage turned around. Only then did he break his silence. When I became Hokage, Danzo, I allowed you to form root in an attempt to cover my shortcomings, my weakness, my inability to put the village ahead of my conscience. I've turned a blind eye to your movements, to the crimes you've committed against the village itself. No more, root is done. Danzo gritted his teeth, but before he could reply, the empty gaze of Agent Konoha stopped him. The child still shed tears, and Danzo would have been disgusted by the pathetic show of emotion if it didn't somehow unsettle him. 15. That's how many underground bunkers you have. You have scrolls hidden around the village containing supplies and classified documents, in 47 locations. You have agents within every major clan, including the Sarutobi. You have illegal dealings with every major criminal syndicate. You are guilty of treason dozens of times over. You ordered agents to steal you Sharingan, to go along with the one you stole from Shisui Uchiha. You take orphans and pair them up as you train them. You force them to kill their partner to graduate training. You've worked with Hanzo the Salamander, and you remain in contact with Orochimaru of the Sannin. Do you deny anything? Danzo calmly shifted his eyes to look at his long-term rival and one-time friend. I did what I did for Konoha. You need me still, Hiruzen. No, we need root. I won't deny that, not yet. But you have become too bitter, jaded, and willful. You have put your own interests before the village's interests. Don't try to argue that. Koharu and Hamura remained silent as Danzo looked between the Hokage and his protege. This had not been a scenario he was ready for yet. Your ward has been trained well, Sarutobi. I'm impressed. Agent Konoha made no reply, the tears still slowly trailing down his mask. You will resign, Danzo as an advisor and as the leader of Root. You will place Konoha as the new director, under my complete authority. Konoha will vet them for their loyalty. He will rekey their seals to remain active under himself. You will assist him in this transition. You may advise him if he approaches you, but you will remain under constant observation. If you violate any of these stipulations, you will be executed immediately for treason. Do you understand? Danzo looked between the two, and to the surprise of Koharu and Hamura, he nodded once. I understand. I do not regret my actions, but I see nothing wrong with grooming my own replacement. If this is what the Hokage demands, then I will honor these conditions. It's clear that you are the best choice for the position. He looked to the boy and nodded. It appears I am under your care, Konoha-san. The boy said nothing. Hiruzen gave a dry chuckle and looked at Danzo. Your orders caused Itachi to go rogue. I don't know when you'll be forgiven for that. Danzo shrugged and stood. I have no interest in forgiveness. I only want the best for the village. Hiruzen turned to the two advisors as Konoha escorted Danzo out of the office. I think it's time the three of us had a talk about exactly where you fall in the hierarchy of the village. A reminder of who you should and should not be keeping secrets from. Sai stood straight up as the rest of the Root assembled in the main hall of Bunker 9. Bunker 9 was created to be an emergency meeting point where village VIPs would be relocated in the event of a successful invasion. It hadn't been used except for 3 times in the past 5 years. He and Shin had just been training, when another agent appeared next to their instructor, and their session had abruptly ended. They had quickly made their way to the designated meeting place, and saw that the entirety of Root had been summoned. When they had all filed in, Danzo stepped forward out of the shadows. Beside him was a figure that was around Sai's own age in an unusual mask. Sai knew the shinobi to not be part of Root, which made this entire situation unusual in and of itself. The day has come for things to change. Leadership of Root is being transferred to Konoha effective immediately. 7 different Root agents surrounded the two, separating Danzo from the agent Konoha. 6 of them focused on watching the boy as Danzo was checked over for genjutsu or other nonverbal tells of forced coercion. After a few seconds, the agent checking over Danzo stepped back and kneeled in Konoha's direction. Immediately, every Root ninja kneeled and lowered their heads in Konoha's direction. Sai didn't know what would happen from this point on, but this was big. Their new leader stood forward, his mask covered in blood and dirt. There were tear tracks down the bottom half of it that mixed the blood and dust together. He looked them over and then nodded. Continue on. Halt all graduation exercises until further notice. I want a list of all current operatives and operations. Dismissed. As they were dismissed, Sai couldn't help but think of how similar their new leader, Konoha, was to Danzo when they both gave orders. There was no protocols established for leadership being transferred to someone other than Danzo. Danzo himself probably hadn't expected this to happen. He was cooperating, and that meant he did think it was the best option at this current time. Perhaps, everything was okay. You're not okay, Naruto. I think you need to tone down the training. It was only his standing as both the Anbu commander and his position as Naruto's older brother that made the stubborn kid stop his katas and fall to the ground. You might be blessed with ungodly stamina, but even you have limits. This wasn't the first time that he had seen the boy training until his limbs were shaking, but he wasn't happy to see it again. The last time it had happened was when Naruto had gotten in a bad fight with the Kyuubi Kurama about something to do with the blind Uchiha. He was taking the disappearance of Itachi badly. Very badly. He sat down beside the 7-year-old and rested his hand on the boy's head. They sat in silence and just watched the clouds pass them by. I miss him. Kakashi didn't need empathy to hear the sorrow dripping from Naruto's words. I know. We'll find him and then we'll find out why he did what he did. I'm sure he had a reason, Naruto. I want to talk to you about your hands. The boy tensed, but didn't move as Kakashi slowly took his hands and examined them. Naruto had ragged scars down the middle of his palms. Naruto, why are these still visible? Your healing should have taken care of them by now. The boy turned his head and avoided meeting his eyes. I asked to keep them. I wanted to remember that night. I'll heal them when he comes back. Kakashi wanted to tell him that Itachi could never return after what he had done. That hoping for things to return to normal was hopeless. That Itachi's best hope was imprisonment. He knew that Naruto already sensed what he wished to say within him, and that was enough. Naruto curled up into his side and just sobbed a little. I'll let you know if we find anything about him. If we find him, I'll let you talk to him. I won't keep you in the dark about it. He shouldn't let his emotions overwhelm his judgment, but it was worth it for the quiet whispered thank you that came from the boy's lips. Team Ro needs a new captain. Would you? No, that was his weasel's position, and I'm not strong enough for missions. I couldn't save the Uchiha. I need to get stronger. I want to learn jutsu now. Considering that I'm known for copying over 1,000 jutsu, I'm sure that I have some to teach you that would interest you. I agree. I think it's time to put you back on the path of training. Thank you, and when do you think my training can start up again? I'll talk to the Hokage. See if you and Team Ro can get a mission as well. What's wrong? I'm being reassigned. Naruto wiped his eyes and sniffled. I'm going to become an Anbu captain. Kakashi narrowed his eye. What? There's no squad that needs a captain besides Ro. Cat is taking over Ro. I only answer to you and the Hokage. You have no squad? What purpose will you serve? Naruto looked away. I can't really say Hokage Gigi wants it off the record. I needed higher clearance though, so that's why the rank. It's just a formality. Naruto, I don't like this. Are you sure you're not getting too far in over your head? I have to do this, and I-san. The boy gave him a tight hug, and he couldn't help but smile softly. Be safe, Naruto-kun. You still have family that loves you here. I know. Waking up in a hospital room is an unpleasant experience. Waking up in a hospital room after having never expected to wake up again is a different experience altogether. Shisui heard the beeping of a machine monitoring his vitals and reflexively tensed. He could tell there was one other person in the room who was moving around a few feet away. Shisui didn't know where he was. All that he knew was that he had to get out. The fire won't burn the trees. The voice spoke from his side and Shisui paused. That was a phrase that had been used in the last Shinobi War. It was used to identify medic needs to their injured or disorientated comrades. He stayed still for a few seconds, almost expecting a kunai to slit his throat, before he felt the telltale sensation of a medical jutsu soothing his chest. Where am I? You're in an underground bunker hidden in the village. We had to keep you in the shadows during your recovery. We? Me and your savior. Agent Konoha brought you to me as you were on death's door and ordered me to save you. Shisui felt himself relax somewhat. Whoever these people were, they clearly weren't root. Shisui realized that Agent Konoha was the designation of the Anbu under Itachi's command. Agent Konoha? Isn't he an Anbu? Why aren't I in the hospital? There were worries that with the escalation of the situation that you'd be captured or kidnapped from a hospital room or worse, incarcerated or killed for involvement of the Uchiha coup. You know? I thought only the Hokage and the advisors. Konoha kept me informed. If anything, the current situation is worse off for you. After the Uchiha Massacre, it was rumored in the higher levels that Itachi may have had assistance. Shisui felt the darkness squeezing in on him. He grew unbearably cold, and his voice croaked feebly from his suddenly weak body. Uchiha Massacre? So Itachi killed over 90% of the Uchiha clan, yes. And if you were to suddenly appear now, you'd never be let out of the compound again, at best. No, your future lies down another path. What are you talking about? My path? My clan is